faire l'amour sous la plage en savourant chaque seconde. Où mon corps engourdi s'enflamme jusqu'à s'endormir dans tes bras. Je suis femme et quand on est femme, on ne dit pas ces choses-là. Je t'offrirai des beaux bijoux, de feux pour ton appartement, de parfums à vous rendre fou et juste à côté de Milan. Dans une ville qu'on appelle Bergame, je te ferai construire une villa. Je suis femme et quand on est femme, on n'achète pas ces choses-là.
Council will stand in session. Roll call, please.
I'm not here asking you to stop growth.
A member of my family was killed with a gun. It can happen, and it does, and it was an
For you
accident.
to vote against these fares and cutting services.
Aye passes 5-2.
A lot can happen in a day. We'll make sure you don't miss a thing.
Il faut vivre.
Come back down from that. So we're ready for the preliminary items on our agenda. And the first thing is we don't have any additional agenda items this evening, but we do have one consent agenda item that has been requested to be removed from the consent agenda, and that's item E, the single reading ordinance awarding a contract for lighting efficiency upgrades in the community center. So we will take that up as a separate item following the consent agenda. Reminder to folks that next Monday, a week from today, February 17th, city offices will be closed for the President's Day holiday, so the City Council will be meeting the following evening, Tuesday, February 18th. And the following night, Wednesday, February 19th, we will be meeting here at 7 o'clock, and this will be having the first of two roundtable discussions with city departments. And the second set of roundtables with city departments will take place the following week on Thursday, February 27th. So both of those are at 7 o'clock in this auditorium. And then just a quick note on upcoming agenda items. Monday, February 24th, we've tentatively scheduled two public hearings for traffic calming, one for Boyd Avenue and one for Garland Avenue. Let me also just point out that one of the things that I'll bring up in my council comments concerns the kind of a quick check-in with the council about the potential for an upcoming vote at WMATA this week, and so I won't cover that now, but we'll cover that a little bit later. So at this point, we will go to public comments on voting items on this evening's agenda, and we'll take those in order.
You're not a voting item. Just.
So first, we'll ask for any public comments on our first voting item, which is the first reading ordinance amending the ethics ordinance. Does anybody wish to comment on that one?
Public service is a public trust. I need to make that very clear. This is something that is drummed into us as federal employees pretty much every day. And I think the federal ethics ordinances are a lot more strict than the city one. And so my thoughts come from that perspective. In looking at the city ordinance, now you may not be able to make these changes tonight. You may need to research them a little bit. But there's a couple things that I think should be in the city ordinance. I think we should have prohibit incumbent council members from using city resources, including their city email, to either campaign for office or to advocate for anyone else standing in office. I think that places an unfair advantage on the sitting council members, and so it should be expressly prohibited. I have looked at the current ordinance, and it is not expressly said. It could possibly be implied, but I think it needs to be expressly said. And the other thing is that I'm concerned that when the city council gives out grants to certain community organizations, there should be some disclosure of the council members' relation to that organization and perhaps some recusal. I think we have very little, I don't know what kind of oversight there is for a council member to say, you know, either my wife is in charge of this organization and I should recuse myself, or I'm a member of this organization and I should recuse myself. But typically, we have attorneys that we go to and say, this is an issue that I've been presenting with, what should I do? Do I need to recuse myself or whatever? The other thing is that I don't think there is effective penalties in the ordinance. I mean, basically, the worst that can happen to you is that you get kicked off the council. But for an outgoing council member, that is not much of an incentive to maintain their ethical behavior. So public service is a public trust, and I hope that you will strengthen the ordinance in this way. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else who wishes to comment on this first reading ordinance? Okay, seeing nobody else, does anybody wish to comment on our second voting item, which is the first reading ordinance amending the Tacoma Park Code to opt out of Montgomery County's tree protection and tree canopy preservation regulations? Seeing nobody, I'll move to the third one, first reading ordinance authorizing FY 2014 budget amendment number 4.
Hi, it's me again. The concern that I have about this budget amendment is that there's nothing in the write-up the way it is. However, one council member did express the desire to amend the current amendment to add funding for sidewalks. I need to bring to the council's and the public's attention that the process that has been followed for sidewalks has been not in accordance with the policy that was set out by the council in 2012. The policy says that if a resident requests a sidewalk, that they must survey the neighborhood before going forward, before having a public meeting. That has not been done. That means that every process that has been done has been illegal. It's invalid and illegal. And I think we should definitely not be putting additional funds into this process until we have it clear. I feel very uncomfortable if council members are pressuring staff to go outside of the policy to implement their desires. So again, public service is a public trust, so please, please know what your policies are, follow them, and don't try to run roughshod over the public process. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody? Oh, yes.
Evening. I'm John Godfrey. I live here in Tacoma Park. I'm asking the City Council to consider this evening an amendment to the amendment providing for engineering and design funds for a sidewalk in the 1000 block of Elm Avenue. The neighborhood has begun the process of whether to proceed with that sidewalk, but that process can't begin really until there's money provided for engineering. There's no reason to have a vote on whether to proceed with the design for money that's not there this year. The neighborhood has seen a huge influx of cars because of the construction at New Hampshire Avenue along Sligo Creek. We've become a bit of a cut through. My daughter and my daughter's friends walk to the school bus stop at the corner of there at Elm Avenue, and every morning we dodge cars. It's exacerbated in the weather. People drive crazy in the morning. You're aware of this. The concern is that with a further delay in completion of the New Hampshire Avenue Bridge, this is a situation that isn't going to fade away as time goes on, but rather we're going to be stuck with for a while. I mean, by every measure, the neighborhood should have sidewalks in terms of density of housing and the number of cars that travel on the street. We don't have it, and we walk in the street to get to the bus stop. And it just, anyway, I would hope that the city would amend the budget to provide the financing necessary, if appropriate. That's what the neighborhood votes to do, to proceed with engineering and design of that sidewalk project. So thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any questions?
There's a bucket down here. I know I'm short, but I didn't think I was that short. Joe Edgell from 1001 Elm Avenue. I am here to second what John said about amending the budget to include some engineering and design funds for the sidewalk in the 1000 block of Elm Avenue. I don't have any kids, but I do have a dog, which I think most of you know, and walking the dog in the morning and in the evening has been particularly challenging because we have to jump in between cars in order to avoid much of the traffic. The city is very graciously, the city staff put some temporary cones up, but a couple of the residents keep removing the cones, and so the sidewalk that is there is not terribly reliable. Daryl has basically said that at this point she cannot or is not sending out the letter that we all would get to vote until there's funding. So we're in this catch-22 where there's no funding, so there's no letter to vote, and there's no letter to vote, which would trigger the funding. So if you all could free up some funding this year as opposed to the next fiscal year for the design funds, then Daryl would send out the letter, and the community could get a thumbs up or a thumbs down on whether the sidewalk is a good idea. Based on our surveys, most of the folks seem to think it is a good idea, and it certainly would make people feel safer. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Anybody else on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll move along to the fourth voting item, which is a resolution adopting a revised community grants program. Anybody wish to comment on that one?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Wallace. Good evening, council members. I believe there's one four-letter word that is missing from this particular agenda item. And I'd like to preface telling you what that four-letter word is by reading you this excerpt. First, Tacoma Park is known for music, arts, poetry, etc. But I'd like it to be known for something else. Also, the windows of a spaceship casually frame miracles. Every 92 minutes, another sunrise, a layer cake that starts with orange, then a thick wedge of blue, then the richest, darkest icing decorated with stars. The secret patterns of our planet are revealed. Mountains bump up rudely from orderly plains. Forests are green gashes edged with snow. Rivers glint in the sunlight, twisting and turning like silvery worms. Continents splay themselves out whole, surrounded by islands sprinkled across the sea like delicate shards of shattered eggshells. Floating in the airlock before my first spacewalk, I knew I was on the verge of even rarer beauty. To drift outside, fully immersed in the spectacle of the universe, while holding on to a spaceship orbiting Earth at 17,500 miles an hour, it was a moment I'd been dreaming of and working toward most of my life. But poised on the edge of the sublime, I faced a somewhat ridiculous dilemma: how best to get out there. The hatch was small and circular, but with all my tools strapped to my chest, and a huge pack of oxygen tanks and electronics strapped onto my back, I was square. Square astronaut, round hole. That is the first page of the book, An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth, by Canadian astronaut Colonel Chris Hadfield. He wrote such beautiful prose that those who stopped to listen to it were maybe transported out of this room into another place. Art transforms us, transports us. But this art, this prose, could not have been written without an engineering degree, a flight pilot's license, and even more. And I think that what's missing in our grant is the word STEM: science, technology, engineering, and math. The grants need to be able to be made to those subjects also. That's what it's for the future of our country as much as the arts. And you can put them together and make beautiful stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to comment on this item? And does anybody wish to have any comments on any of the consent agenda items? Okay, thank you all. This is just a reminder that starting at the beginning of this year, we changed our way that we structure public comments, and this is to try and make it so that people who do wish to comment on anything in our meeting have an opportunity to do so early in the meeting. You know it's going to happen at 7:30. We had instances where on voting items, people had to wait for the voting item until late in the evening, so that's why this has changed. We're taking those first, and we will now take public comments on non-voting items and other matters. So anything that's not on the agenda or anything that's a work session this evening. And I noticed some young people in the audience who wish to make comments, and so if you all want to come up and make those, we'll do those first. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Margot Block, and I go to Tacoma Park Middle School, and I'm here as part of the Young Activist Club. We are students from Piney Branch Elementary School and Tacoma Park Middle School working to get rid of waste in our community, and mainly polystyrene, the polystyrene trays in our cafeteria, and we're trying to replace them with a dishwasher and reusable trays. Thank you for letting us testify and for your support the past 5 years that we have been working on this project, particularly passing resolutions, the resolution not to buy polystyrene food serviceware with city funds, for example. And we are here tonight to show our support for passing a citywide ban on using polystyrene food serviceware. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Emma McIninch, and I am in fourth grade, at Piney Branch Elementary School, and we all just wanted to say a big thank you for banning polystyrene at the Tacoma Park food trucks, and so thank you again.
Thanks.
So,
Tell us who you are.
Oh, I'm Anna Brooks. I go to Tacoma Middle, and I guess I'd like to talk about why we want to ban polystyrene. Well, polystyrene is recognized by the FDA as a known neurotoxicant, which means it damages your brain, and a suspected human carcinogen, which reasonably anticipated human carcinogen, which means it probably causes cancer. And we'd definitely like to get this out of our community, and out of our schools and everything. Plus also, once you can't recycle polystyrene or styrofoam, you can't, it just gets burned, and it's littered everywhere, and it's just not a good thing. So yeah, we came here to propose a citywide ban on polystyrene. This is pretty much an extension of the ban you already had on the food trucks in the city, and we are looking to ban not only styrofoam, the white soft stuff, but also all forms of polystyrene or any plastic or foam or whatever that carries the number 6 resin code. That looks like a number 6 in a little triangle. We'd like this in the food trucks already, in restaurants, in public events like the Folk Festival and the Street Festival and all that, and we hope you can consider it. So thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Isabel. I am a 4th grader at Piney Branch Elementary School. As you know, we want to ban polystyrene from our community. So we don't want to just ban the styrofoam. We also want to ban the polystyrene. Polystyrene can either be clear or colored, like these cups. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Elise from Piney Branch Elementary School, and I'm in 4th grade. I'm just here to talk about the hundreds of alternative products for polystyrene. There are a lot of different types. There's like biodegradable, well, most of them are biodegradable. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Mira Diamond Berman, and I go to Tacoma Middle School. Lots of cities and countries have banned styrene, and we have them listed on our website. The mayor of DC has introduced a proposal to ban styrene, and his council supports it too.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Leo Blaine. I go to Tacoma Park Middle School, and we just wanted to make sure that we don't get a recycling program because CPS doesn't have one. And if you try and recycle polystyrene, it'll just end up getting burned in the Dickerson incinerator.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lily, and I'm from Piney Branch Elementary School. And I am here, of course, to ask for a ban of polystyrene. We also support that the city requiring reusable, recyclable, or compostable food serviceware. We are concerned, though, that no one... Wait, that's not right. Food serviceware. Compostable products could be included with the collection of food scraps, which the city is already doing for some households. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jake Foley-Keen, and I am an 8th grader at Tacoma Park Middle School. We also wish, with the passing of this ban, to improve the existing polystyrene restrictions on just around the town. First of all, people who rent rooms on any Tacoma Park grounds or in the community center are given a list of compliances that go along with being allowed to rent the room. And those rules should be changed to include the restriction of polystyrene in the county as well. Also, we've noticed that not all the food trucks are polystyrene free. We've noticed at least one that is still using polystyrene, and we just want to make sure that the city and the council have been able to communicate the law clearly with all the food trucks that are coming. And finally, the city has put together flyers such as this one on the Safe Routes to School programs. So we thought maybe we should, maybe both the council and the club could put together one on the harmful effects of polystyrene and like the alternatives and stuff like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Love it.
Hi, I'm Anna Grace I'm Anna Grace, and I'm a 3rd grader at Piney Branch Elementary School. And just the Young Activist Club, and I would like to say thank you again for listening to us tonight. It really just means a lot to us. And we would like to know how you plan to address our request and what next steps are. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all very much. We really appreciate all of you coming and sharing your thoughts. I have to comment that you do a remarkable job of organizing yourselves and getting across a number of clear points in a very efficient manner, and it makes it much easier to respond. We don't respond to public comments kind of in this forum because we want to give everybody a chance to share with us what they think about various things. So we won't be able to kind of give you a point by point tonight, but I think we would like to do that in a fairly quick time frame, and we will contact you and get back to you with a number of responses to particular requests that you've made. Some of them I think are pretty easy and quick to take care of, and some of them may take some consultation with you in figuring out the best way to proceed, and we will do that. And we really appreciate your efforts. Thank you. Other public comment? Mr. Lovelace in the back.
Hello, my name is Pat Lovelace. My name is Pat Lovelace, your official peace delegate. I just want to ask people here if we could get the ward nights back. I kind of miss those, and other people I think miss them too. Because it'd be nice if we could get the ward nights back, and also a children's night where the children could speak out more in the city, because we don't hear from them very often. And I want to thank the Young Activist Club for what they are doing, very much what they are doing. And also I'd like to ask them, what can the adults do to help the Young Activist Club, whether it be by adult supervision or opening the school up or whatever, what can the adults do to help the Young Activist Club? And also I want to say, I miss you, Kay Daniels Cohen. I want you to get well soon. I miss your little voice up here so much, giving out the gold stars. So I'll have to give you a gold peace sign for everything you've done for us in this city and continue to do for us in this city. Maybe sometime you can call, if you can't make it over here, you can always call up on the phone. I'd still get a chance to hear you. But really, another thing I'd like to ask the Young Activist Club, if they could look into a way to stop school bullying and stop violence and gun violence in our city and in our country, what we could do to help them get a better, peaceful society that we can live in, because they're going to be our future leaders, and they may be our leaders today. So what can we do to help you young kids? I'd like to know what the adults can do. Thank you very much. Now continue on, and also I want to tell everybody out there, register to vote, and then get out and vote. What we're seeing today in our Congress, in our Senate, and our governors is a result of irresponsible voting and not voting and not registering to vote. People who don't seem to bother with it. This is a direct result of what happens when you don't vote. People are always asking me that. What happens if I don't vote? What happens if this? Well, you can look in your news every day and see what's happening. You can look at your food stamps and see what's happening. You can look at your unemployment and see what's happening. Yep, you can look at your Head Start programs and our education and see what's happening. So please, learn about your candidates. Get out there and vote. Vote, vote. It's actually an emergency almost that we have to save this country. And I'd like the Young Activist Club to help us in our peace work. So please, what can we do to stop the gun violence? What can we do to stop the bullying in our schools? Because that's really, really a tragedy, and that can scar a kid's mind for life. Thank you very much. Remember that. Peace.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Good evening. My name is Rue McKenzie from Washington Adventist University, your neighborhood university. And I just want to take a moment to commend these students. As an educator, I sat there and I felt so proud of what you have done. And I have a couple containers of this stuff that is supposed to be banned in my garage, and I promise you I will not use it. I will find a way to dispose of it. You were so convincing, and very soon one of you will be mayor of the city. Oops, I'm sorry about that. Very soon one of you or some of you will be leaders in our country, and that is truly commendable. You did an outstanding job. And I just want to introduce one of my colleagues, Professor Fuentes. Come forward. And we have another kind of program to build health in the community, and he's going to talk about that briefly this evening.
Thank you very much. Like you said, my name is Alvin Fuentes. I'm one of the professors at Washington Adventist University. And today we have the honor to present on one of our events that are going to be in this community. On April 13, we will be having our 5K walk run for our school. And I'm going to flip this over so people can see it here. All right. As you know, our institution was established in 1904, and we'll be following the wellness and fitness trend since then. One of the things that we want to do in conjunction with Washington Adventist Hospital and WGTS, we are combining our efforts to put this major event for our city here. We want to bring this event as one of the best ones that we can put out there, inviting elite athletes to come in and try our event. All the proceeds for this event are going to go to our Acro Air gymnastic team, which they perform nationally. Recently, they just performed in Indiana with the Indiana Pacers there, in which they lost, but they have performed in different stadiums like Chicago and some other around the nation. The other part of that is going to go to our missions field, in which our students travel all around the world doing mission, representing our school, and which is part of our city here. And in conjunction to this, what's going to happen is we will have our Family Fun Festival, in which, as you know, last year we have about 5,000 spectators coming in, and we have renowned Christian singers that come to our event when we have all kinds of fun activities for the children, and we also have our international food going on. And attached to what we're going to do there that day, we also are going to do assessments for the community for free, including physical assessments from body BMIs and nutrition assessments that we're going to do for them. We're going to do blood pressures, and the hospital is going to be joining us with all the efforts for this. And we are just excited about this event. It will be the first one that we will put together with our 3 major institutions there. So we are very happy to be part of what we're going to be bringing to this city. So thank you for the opportunity to let us present this, and we're looking forward to see our community out there on April 13th. Sunday at Sligo Creek. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Anybody else?
Barbara Muehlbacher, 1001 Elm Avenue. I understand you've taken comments, public comments for a voting item already. I apologize, I just got here, and I would appreciate it if I could speak. In regards to the sidewalk on 1000 block Elm Avenue, I urge you to include funding for the design and completion of a sidewalk in that block. As you know, it's been a precarious situation there with Sligo Creek Parkway being closed, and a lot of kids walk to the school bus that's on the corner of Elm and Larch through the 1000 block of Elm, and we really need a sidewalk there for the safety of everybody, especially the kids that walk to the school bus. And so I urge you to include the funding to get that process started. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've never done this before. You push it over lower. Oh, it does work. Wow. Okay.
Want to go a little more?
Does it? Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm not good at machine.
Is that good?
Yeah, it's good. Okay. It was very inspiring to be here with our young activists. I'm here as an old activist, and
an experienced activist.
I guess, and feeling mighty old sometimes. And I'm speaking on behalf of Historic Tacoma. And as you know, there's going to be a WMATA Real Estate Committee meeting on Thursday, and I think you're going to talk a little bit about it in your comments, and I know you're going to present them with something. There's a lot of concern that remains in the community, and Maryland stands to really be harmed by the development that's moving forward. And I can assure you that the neighbors that are there are very, very worried about this. And this particular meeting kicks off the process, and it's not going to be a very pleasant process for us. And so I am here to really ask you, my council, and particularly my mayor and city manager and my council member, to consider and to please go there in person. And Bruce, you're an old hand at WMATA issues, and it wouldn't be the first time that you've attended a WMATA meeting, and I recognize that They may or may not let you speak, but it's difficult for me to believe that the city of Tacoma Park, if it appears there, to speak to them from their heart about the concern and ask them to not move this forward until we have a chance to bring in Stan Wall and have a serious conversation on how we can make this a better project. I don't think anyone is looking to stop this project. I think people are very concerned with how it is designed, its massing, its scale, and there are many, many issues associated with it, and there are serious ones. And WMATA is, or I should say Maryland is part of WMATA, and so you should and have a right to be there. It's important that you are there to speak for us because you are the only ones at this point with the strongest voice and the ability to get their attention amidst all the concern that is truly out there. It is really only you that can do this. And so I urge you, it is not enough to send a piece of paper. At this point, it is really important to go there and talk to them about, please work with us. Come and do not push this forward until we are all in a good place. Please, I urge you to do that. Thank you.
Can I make another comment? It has nothing to do with the last one. Yeah. Hi. Hi again. I'm Elizabeth Wallace. I live on Holly Avenue at the exit/entrance to the Tacoma Park Elementary School. And every morning and evening when the cars are going in and out, it's a really, really bad traffic jam because the parents are trying to go in and out one way and the buses are going out the other. I may be wrong, but I think when I attended the meetings for the school, I thought they said they were going to have they built that whole new bus system to go in and out. I thought the buses were going to turn left and go down the hill and out that way. They don't. They turn right and come down toward the middle school because I think it's shorter. Because I think their next stop is the middle school. I'm not sure, but that's the way they go. But the problem is the buses are coming down the street. There's cars parked on either side, and their parents are trying to go up the street. So there are also many parents or caregivers who park their cars right along where it's the yellow curb, sometimes two cars. That location is right at the exit from the school, and it makes it impossible for people coming out to get out at all. I've had people park there for 10, 15 minutes. I've told them that's illegal. I have called the police. The police haven't come in time. So you might want to take a look at posting police there or something at those times to make sure that people kind of get the message that illegal parking right there on the yellow line is impeding traffic and making it difficult for everybody to get in and out. Or just take a look at the traffic patterns. But it's been going on for a long time. I've mentioned it to Mr. Grimes. And actually, when I go into the school and mention there's a particular car that's a particular repeat offender, the school officials say, please call the police. So I do. So anyway, I don't know what the solution is, but please help me solve the problem. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hi, it's Catherine Tunis, and I have a series of topics here I'd like to raise, or at least to start a discussion on. One is to follow up on the sidewalk. That process was illegal and invalid. A council member cannot replace his opinion for the full and open process of the City Council, and there was no survey done, so no funding should be allocated for any sidewalk that has not had an appropriate process. The other thing I wanted to raise is that the state highway construction on New Hampshire Avenue, as everyone knows now, that was not completed last December 31st as we were promised. I'm sure you realize that this was a problem with the quality of the work that was done that will need to be redone. They're hoping to have that done certainly by the end of this year. But we've had a discussion a little bit within the Saska community, and residents have asked for additional help with signage and police to discourage the cut-through traffic and aggressive driving. We also have a proposal from a neighbor which is garnering a fair amount of support. There are a couple people opposed, but a fair amount of support to make temporarily Heather one-way going out towards Sligo Creek Parkway and Larch, the 900 block of each one, one way going out towards New Hampshire Avenue, and that would cut off the main amount of cut-through traffic and certainly make it a lot safer for the children going to the bus stop. I don't think it's appropriate to put in a permanent changes, either one way or sidewalks, for a temporary problem. I think we need to try to address things more with the community. One of the concerns that I heard in this discussion was the excess traffic on 410 that has occurred since the bus bay was filled in. My understanding is that bus bay was filled in, the one at the junction, that was filled in upon the orders of the city public works director. I think it could have been a misunderstanding on her part, but whatever, I'm hoping that we can start a discussion and a process to have a pullout for the buses, put in there one that takes into account the recommendations of the Junction Task Force, that perhaps cuts off what is, I can't remember what Laura calls it, cutting the bump or something.
Chop the chunk.
Chop the chunk. Thank you very much. So if we can start a discussion on that, that would be fabulous too, because that would be a more permanent solution for the 410 traffic. The other thing is that we still have concerns about the emergency room. Time is ticking away for the legislative session, and I really would urge the city to take some action and encourage that the General Assembly put in a request to keep the emergency room here in Tacoma Park. If it's not important for you today, it's going to be important for you at some day. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else? Okay, that's the end of public comment. We will now go to council comment. Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you. Although we lost most of the people who came to comment at this evening's meeting, I wanted to thank the people who stayed and the ones who have left as well. And just one other thing, that Councilmember Mail texted me that he is stuck in traffic and he will probably be another half an hour, but I mention this particularly because people have been bringing up issues that are located in Ward 2.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. I want to thank Dr. McKenzie for coming out this evening. I appreciate it. We had the opportunity to meet this past week. I hope that we can continue our conversations and implement some of the projects that we discussed. One thing I would hope is that some of the proceeds from the 5K that you guys are going to use for overseas missions, that you would use some of those proceeds for a mission here in Tacoma Park. There are many residents that do need assistance, and Washington Adventist University is known for going around the world and helping people in need. I would also like to mention that I testified before the County Council this past week, hoping to accelerate the money promised to the Flower Avenue Green Street project in fiscal year 16. I do not know if this is going to happen, but we can only hope. I would like to get an update from the city manager on Essex House. Have the residents had an opportunity to meet with the housing staff and talk about the renovations and the bike share station that it's supposed to be located on Flower Avenue? Have you heard anything more about that? Finally, I would like to mention that this Saturday there will be an event at Historic Tacoma. It's going to be sponsored by the Tacoma Park Co-op and Progressive Neighbors Mike Tabor. The topic is GMOs and how legislation might impact Maryland consumers. The guest speaker is going to be our Senator Barbara Mikulski. Thank you.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I too would like to thank the young activists for being here this evening. I think it's remarkable to see the age of the children and just their advocacy for something that affects not only their future but our future too. And it's so great to see, as one of the speakers said earlier, that we have these young people who are going to be the leaders of our community, and they're already out there trying to help shape the opinions and the actions of this community. So again, thanks to the young activists and their leaders for coming here tonight. And I would like to point out to my colleagues that we like to think of ourselves as being environmental leaders in the country, but that many municipalities in the country have already addressed the polystyrene issue, and so we need to take action and move forward with that. Mr. Kenner, I wanted to just emphasize the importance of some of the requests. I know I've kind of bombarded you this week with some, but talking about the traffic restriction signs, there's still some issues that need some minor details worked out. I did talk with Ms. Daines about the renovation work for some of our less fortunate neighbors that need some work done in their homes. We have some particular needs in Ward 4 that I'd like to follow up with that. And then also, we again having problems with trash accumulation on Lee Avenue. And again, I've spoken with Ms. Daines about that, but I look forward to getting replies back on those things. And then lastly, an issue I haven't talked with anyone about is the gate at Public Works. When we renovated Public Works, one of the goals was to eliminate the trash trucks from using Oswego Avenue because of the limited width of that street and the fact it is a residential street. Trash trucks were to be using Ritchie Avenue, and I know the gate is, I guess, broken. Anyways, that entrance is closed now, and I'd like to get an update on when we can expect that to be reopened so that the trash trucks can start to use Ritchie Avenue again. Thank you. That's all.
Okay. I just want to let folks know that I attended a meeting on Poplar Avenue last week, met with some neighbors about their concerns about a tree protection plan and tree removal requests that are before the Tree Commission. I attended the Maryland Mayors Association meeting last week and spent some time talking with folks about potential amendments to the ethics amendment, to the ethics ordinance statewide, talking a good bit about a subject that I knew very little about, which was a potential 5-cent tax on biddies. And biddies are little tiny baby chicks. And this was something that got a fair amount of play at the end of the week when the governor came out and said he would veto the bill if that was passed. I ended up kind of working in the middle of that one, kind of getting dragged into it. Had lunch with one of our delegates, Sheila Hickson, on Friday, and had the opportunity to talk about a number of issues with her, including our concerns about tax duplication, and I promised that I would get her some information on that in anticipation of things going to the legislature next year. Wanted to note that there was a very successful midwinter play day yesterday here in the community center. I was here for a short while and saw a lot of people. Also saw Councilmember Grimes here and City Manager Kenner here as well. And there were hundreds of people, and it looked like a real fun event and a great, I think, fourth midwinter play day. And congratulations to all those people who worked so hard to put it together. A couple upcoming things. Reminder to folks that District 20 night in Annapolis is next Monday, the 17th, and since this is a city holiday and we won't be meeting, it's a good chance for my colleagues on the council to go, and others in the community who wish to go need to RSVP to the District 20 delegation, and it starts at 6:30 in the Miller Senate building, and it's going to be in the West 1 room, which is where they always have receptions. So that's next Monday, the 17th at 6:30. Also a reminder that this Saturday night, as part of the We Are Tacoma series, another performance by the Tacoma Ensemble, and this is a nice evening of classical music performed by a group from Tacoma Park. And the last one that I went to was full house, so if people are interested, it's at 7:30 in this room, and a reminder that those events are always free, but a donation is requested. And then the final thing that I wanted to mention was the sudden appearance on the WMATA committee agenda for this Thursday, a proposal to take action on the Tacoma Metro agreement. And I just wanted to check with my colleagues and make sure that we were comfortable with the resolution that we passed on October 28th, which the clerk kindly gave us a copy of here at the dais. And this is our resolution regarding the development proposed for that site. And it basically says that we aren't happy with a number of things in that amended joint development agreement, and feel that those needs, the various things that we list need to be addressed. Concerns about safety, transit accessibility, neighborhood compatibility, massing and step back from Eastern Avenue, building height within current zoning limits, adequate buffer from the neighborhood, traffic and transit use impact. And just wanted to kind of get a reaffirmation that this expresses our concerns, and then that's something that we could then follow through with tomorrow, sending to WMATA a correspondence with a reminder that we have this. And I talked with WMATA board member Kathy Porter today, and she's here this evening, and if you have any comments that you want to make that might be helpful. Let me just say that she volunteered to make sure to distribute any of our comments, any of our concerns to her colleagues on the WMATA board, make sure that they have them in a timely fashion. There was a suggested earlier by Ms. Pearsall about attendance. I'm not sure that I'm available on Thursday. I'm not sure if Councilmember Grimes is available, but we would consider trying to get somebody there. If you can give us any guidance on your estimation of this item actually being on the agenda, and any other thoughts you have.
It's currently scheduled for the agenda. Whether it actually appears or not is up to the chair of the committee. Muriel Bowser, who's council member for the District of Columbia, chairs that committee. I assume it will be up because it's scheduled, but she can pull it from the agenda even up to the last minute if she wishes. So I can't make any guarantees to you. I would say I think it would be very useful for you to forward on the material that you sent them before. The phase that it's in right now, which is the joint development agreement, focuses primarily on the financial part of the agreement, but that includes the square footage. So if you had any particular comments you wanted to make on the joint development piece of it, that would be extremely timely. And as I said, it includes the financial aspects of the proposal, but it also includes the total square footage that the developer is allowed to develop. So if you had any particular things to point out in that aspect, that would be extremely timely.
Councilmember Grimes, did you have a question for her or comment?
I do, but I need another minute.
Okay, Councilmember Schultz.
Yeah, my thinking on the Tacoma Station project is that there isn't necessarily a point to be made with WMATA that the number of units or the square footage, gross square footage, needs to be reduced. And I'm not speaking for anybody up here on the council except for myself, but my observations is that they want to push everything so much over to the residential side where the single-family houses are, and there's no need to do that. They could very easily add another story to the primary building and maintain all the square footage. it would raise the building height a little bit, but it would be not really noticeable in terms because of being so distant from the rest of the buildings in the community. So, I mean, the point being is that the number of units is the square footage. I don't think is at the center of our concerns. I think it's basically the design of the layout of the building, the massing of it along the street, the residential streets, and the possible intrusion on the green space. And there ought to be some way of doing that without undermining the finances of the project. That's just my opinion.
The most recent plan that I've seen, the sort of illustrative plan I've seen, has 3 stories facing Eastern Avenue.
I understand. I've seen it as well.
Okay. Just
And I
want to make
think
sure you've
that's
seen the
at
most
least
recent
one
one.
story too many. Plus, I think if you're going to have that, and again, this is just my opinion, that amount of traffic on Eastern Avenue, all the vehicles coming in to the Kiss and Ride and for all the residents who live in this 206-unit complex, plus the trash trucks and all that coming out onto that narrow street, it just doesn't make sense from an engineering point of view. It's not at all. It just is ridiculous.
Okay.
Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you. Thank you for coming this evening, Mayor, former Mayor Porter. I will plan to attend the PPDRE, Planning Program Development and Real Estate Committee meeting on Thursday morning. I did check with an administrative staffer for the WMATA board who said that there will not be public comment at that meeting. Of course, we recognize, as you say, that the chair of the committee, Muriel Bowser, could choose to pull the item. A letter that was sent by the WMATA board to members of a community group, the D.C. Maryland Neighbors for Tacoma Transit, I participate on the periphery of their discussions, did emphasize that the PPDRE consideration and then the full WMATA board consideration, if this item makes it through PPDRE, would be responsiveness to WMATA's joint development procedures and requirements. I do note that one of those things that's claimed in the materials for the Thursday PPDRE meeting is a claim that Metro staff and the developer consulted local representatives and citizens to, I'm reading of course, to rethink the site plan. The result is an amended plan and financial structure for Tacoma Station Joint Development Project. They did consult us, but it is clear from the Tacoma Park resolution that we passed a few months ago, also from the ANC 4B resolution, that they did not respond in a way that satisfies those parties. But further, so one could argue, and I think that the city should reiterate that we do not believe that they satisfied the joint development requirements, procedural requirements for consultation with the community groups. That is grounds for not carrying forward. I'm saying this, and I'm going to welcome your response. That's grounds for it being premature for the board or the board committee to consider this. That the community consultation has not been adequate, and then. Further, there's the point that the project addresses the transit-oriented development objectives. I make the argument, I think many of us do, that WMATA is sacrificing financially not on the return from the sale of the property, but in the transit ridership that would be realized by this development because of the oversupply of parking, residential parking, in the development, that WMATA is potentially sacrificing revenue from residents who would have cars because of the oversupply of parking there. The district government is in the process of revising its zoning rules to lower the parking minimums required for developments and so on. And so my statement just now is in line with the district government's planning department's attitude toward parking, even more so, of course, when it's immediately adjacent to to a transit hub. I don't know if any of these kind of arguments that I'm making here are going to carry any kind of weight with the WMATA board committee or the full board. I'd welcome your evaluation on that question.
Well, as you know, there's 3 steps to the WMATA process. The joint development agreement is the first step, and it's primarily a financial document. Maybe I should preface this by saying this particular project is different from any of the other projects, joint development projects I've seen at WMATA. Generally, the financial joint development agreement part is not anything that's at all controversial. I mean, basically, WMATA says we've agreed with this developer, we're going to sell them X amount of space for Y amount of money. And, no one but WMATA and the developer care about that part of it. So this is going a little bit differently than most of them. And so I would encourage you, if you have any points you want to bring forward, I would encourage you to bring them forward at whatever point you can make that argument. Right now, I think the committee is going to primarily focus on the issue of the financial and the square footage. The second piece of this would be the compact public hearing. We actually went through this before, I'm sure you all remember. The compact public hearing, there is, they take testimony, they have the staff analyze the testimony, and then it comes back to the board, and the board approves or doesn't approve the compact public hearing report. The compact public hearing process is supposed to focus primarily on the transit portions of this project. I've spoken to someone in the general counsel's office at WMATA, and he says he believes that transit aspects could include things like the location and general massing of the building, although not the design per se. So that might be another point at which there could be some discussion and some impact of that. And then the third part is the PUD process, which is conducted by the District of Columbia and which deals with the design elements of the building itself. So I don't know if that helps to answer your question.
I'll comment on something that was in the council's resolution from a few months ago, which is that the building as it's currently designed has not been significantly revised since early November by the developer UIA, does put a 72-foot tall building in. Half of the lot is zoned residential in the District of Columbia with a 40-foot limit. So it is exceeding the zoning height limit for half of the lot by 80%. The other half of the lot is zoned commercial with a 50-foot limit, still 72 feet. I would be concerned if I were a WMATA board member. In fact, I said this to a WMATA board a few months ago, that they are in the process of potentially approving something that will be unbuildable. Now, who can predict what's going to happen in the district planned unit development process? They might well approve a building that is 72 feet in a 40-foot zone. But if I were on the WMATA board, I would be concerned about voting for that. I don't know if that's an argument that carries any weight either.
I can't speak for the board members. My sense, though, is that the board member representing the jurisdiction in which it's located, usually if they say this is buildable, the rest of the board will take their word for it. That's been my experience on other projects like this. Of course, I would have to say there have not been any other projects very much like this. This is very different, and I think the entire board knows that.
So I'll go back to wanting to get concurrence from my colleagues that we're comfortable with the document that we approved October 28th as the basis for any comments that we might have the opportunity to make, whether in writing to accompany them again or verbally if there's that opportunity on Thursday, if the item comes up on the agenda. And I would say that it's helpful hearing Ms. Porter talk about the 3 phases of the process with this committee and board action being concerned mostly with the financial and square footage, and then going to the compact public hearing where there's kind of a wider opportunity for more comments on more of the concerns that we have. I think we want to make sure that we don't pass up any opportunity, but I also think we want to make sure that we understand that the opportunity for more substantive comments may be at a second stage, not at this stage.
And I wouldn't discourage you from making whatever comments you want to make at whatever part of the process.
Right.
But I sort of wanted to give you a little bit the lay of the land in terms of how these things go.
Councilmember Schultz and then Councilmember Smith. additional comments, or is that an old light?
No, it's a new light. I concur with the mayor. I think the resolution that's been drafted here.
Been approved.
It's been approved, was certainly adequate, but I also agree with Ms. Pearsall that I think it's a good idea for us to have at least one warm body present in the room, because there's nothing quite like a physical presence to influence the way people are hearing things or thinking about things. It may be that no one will have an opportunity from the city to address. That's, we don't have control. That's really the key to this whole thing, is that we don't have any control over anything. We're virtually at the mercy of WMATA and the DC PUD process, and there is apparently very little precedent for trust where we can sort of say, well, we know the folks there, they know us, and we know that there'll be some kind of sensibility and cooperation, and it is alarming, it's concerning, because we can pass resolutions and make the kind of suggestions that Councilmember Grime is proposing that we make, and without any assurance that the meeting won't be canceled, or that the agenda won't be changed, or we won't have any opportunity to speak, or none of these other things will happen the way we expect them to happen. And it's very concerning for that reason. That's all I wanted to say on that.
Did you have initial comments, Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question. Since, as you mentioned, that this is just about the square footage of the process, or the project, and the financials, how will our comments, or this resolution, how will it be added to this meeting or a future meeting before the compact hearing begins? How does, do you have a board meeting and this resolution comes up, or is it just filed away and the board?
It comes to the committee that is meeting on Thursday. It would come to that committee first.
Okay.
And it would be discussed at that committee meeting. And whatever changes the committee chose to make to it. Then it would go to the board. The board usually meets the fourth Thursday of the month. And then if it comes out of committee, if it's voted positively out of committee, it would come to the full board. And at that point, they would schedule, once the thing passed the board, they would schedule a compact public hearing.
Right.
And so that would begin the second part of the process. But I don't want to say that it's just about the finances and the square footage. That's the focus in general of the joint development agreement. This is a very unusual process, and there have been a lot of concerns brought up in this process that I have never seen brought up in a joint development agreement process before. So I can give you what the normal process is, right, but I wouldn't discourage you from raising any concerns that you have whenever you think it's appropriate.
Are you able to say anything more about those concerns?
What?
What the concerns are about the process, presumably you're talking about. Are you talking about internal WMATA board concerns?
No, I'm talking about your concerns.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to indicate otherwise.
So this resolution, does someone from the board or from the committee have to bring up a resolution for it to be considered? Or do you just...
I can, I think the information that I sent included a link to the materials, but I can go ahead and send that to you again. There's a whole package of materials that the entire board, even those who are not on the committee, I'm not on the committee, but even those who are not on the committee get an entire package of materials. It consists of the staff's summary and analysis of the item, and then there's a PowerPoint presentation, and then the last 3 pages of the materials are a proposed resolution, which the committee will consider, and if the committee can pass it, not pass it, amend it, and then it will send it to the board, and then the board would consider it. If the committee passed it, the board would consider it at the end of the month.
And that's for the joint
development agreement,
right.
Yes.
And that's what I understand, but for our resolution, the resolution that's coming from the city.
Right.
So there's nothing that says in the process that the board or the committee has to even look at this document.
As Councilmember Grimes mentioned, there is a requirement in the joint development process that that WMATA, I can't remember exactly what the word is, but it's consult with or some word like that with the communities. And in this one, Tacoma Park is considered one of the communities. I mean, the District of Columbia would be one. There could potentially be others.
Consult with could technically mean that someone from WMATA spoke to the city manager. I mean, it doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that what we've put in this resolution has to be considered. That's not what consult with is defined as.
There is nothing written down that says that your resolution has to be made part of what WMATA does at this point.
All right.
I think what you're doing is you're speaking as one of the parties to this process, and you're specifying the kinds of things that you would like to see happen in order for the process to move forward. That's basically where you are right now. WMATA does not have to take that into account. I think that because Tacoma Park has spoken so strongly on this in the past, I think there is a sensitivity to the concerns that Tacoma Park and the residents of Tacoma Park and Tacoma, D.C. have about this project. I think the one thing that came out of, speaking for myself, the fairly frustrating process we went through the first time, but the thing that came out of this is there is a sensitivity, there is an understanding that the Tacoma Park community, both in the city of Tacoma Park, Maryland, and in Tacoma, D.C., has a lot of concerns about this. So that message has gotten across to the board.
Okay.
And you have volunteered to make sure that all of the board members get our essentially get our resolution again this week, so that it's before them and they're thinking about it as the committee meeting happens.
Yes.
And so that kind of heightens the potential for impact, and that's very helpful, and we appreciate that.
Right. The most of the things that go to the board go into a correspondence file for board members. You know, I read my correspondence. I don't know if other board members do. I know that sometimes the correspondence is there's a large amount of it. So what I offered to do, what I told the mayor I would do, would be to make sure that I forwarded it with a note from me to the individual board members to make sure that they were aware of it.
So, Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Porter, for being here tonight. Not only just for being here and kind of helping this council as we struggle through this important community issue, but thank you for the many, many hours that you put in with the board. I think that's the harder part of the task, I'm sure. I fully support the resolution that we passed and encourage us to go ahead and send that again to the board. And I really appreciate your comments on not staying too focused on what their next item is, but talk to them strongly and often about our position, because I think our history has shown us that if we don't continue to put our opinions in front of them, sometimes they may say, well, it's too late now to do that. So we'll take every opportunity at every turn that we have to remind them what our positions are.
Right.
Thank you.
So it sounds like we're happy with sending this again with whatever we can muster to have a larger impact. It sounds like Councilmember Grimes should be able to go. I will see if I can clear my calendar to go, and we'll see what happens on Thursday. Thank you. No. We will now go to city manager's comments.
We recently released, as in today, the library visioning report. I think many of you all participated in the community comment portion of that. Again, that visioning report had a few different components. One was a series of community meetings about the library. We actually had some staff-related interviews about the library. And then I think the council had an opportunity to talk a little bit about the library. After that, we also had an opportunity to get some survey results back, and so that is all contained in this report, which also has some recommendations from our consultants who have, at least in my brief interactions with them, seem to be fairly knowledgeable about library-related things across the country. One of the things they put in the report is that this is a assessment envisioning for a 21st century public library. So have some interesting things here. One of the things that we'll be doing, which I'll talk a little bit about later, is that we'll have an opportunity to talk specifically about this document with the council and with the community at the department roundtable that's happening next week. So we'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about the results, but just encourage everybody to take a look at it if you haven't seen it yet. And it's on the web. It's on our webpage. If you just go to Tacoma Park.
It's on the webpage, it's not coming by email.
It's not coming by email. It's,
Okay.
it's on our webpage, and you can download the document there or just read it on our webpage.
Okay, thank you. Did you have any other items?
Yes, I did. Just a very quick update about Safe Grow. So we're coming up on one of our first milestone dates, which is the 1st of March, which is when commercial applicators, not residential property owners, but commercial applicators have to be given notice about our Safe Grow ordinance. We are, as of this week, sending out our first notifications to 700-plus commercial applicators in the state of Maryland about our ordinance. The beginning of next week, we will go live with our website for the Safe Grow program. There's a beta version of that site that I know some people have checked out before, but we'll actually go live with it, which is going to have all of our information around education, marketing, the list of applicable and excluded pesticides, but just wanted to give people an update on that. Again, after the March 1st date, the next sort of major milestone that we'll hit is July of this year, which is when we will begin enforcement just again of commercial applicators. The enforcement for residential properties does not begin until really January of 2015, so about a year from now, because we're moving in phases as it relates to the enforcement of it. But just wanted to give everybody a brief update on that. I mentioned before the budget roundtables, the department roundtables, which will be next Wednesday the 19th, and then I think the following Thursday after that. Again, the purpose of the department roundtables is really to have an opportunity for the departments to talk to the council as well as the community really about what they do. It is not meant to be so tied to the budget, so you're not going to hear any big budget numbers or any schedules as it relates to that, but really an opportunity for the department to talk about what it does, how it measures success, what kinds of trends or best practices is it seeing, and then finally what kinds of challenges and opportunities does it see going forward. So it's really just a conversation more than anything else, an opportunity for questions to be asked, information to be exchanged, and so I'm very much, I guess it'll be the first time we've at least that I know of, that we've done something like this, so I'm looking forward to how it works out and just giving a bit of a flavor early in the year about some of the things that our departments are seeing. The resident survey is going to be released here soon. We actually sent out mailings, and maybe I'll actually turn it over to the deputy city manager to talk a little bit about that.
And my mic just fell out. The process of sending out the resident surveys is that there's a preliminary postcard saying, you've been selected. Keep your eyes open for the resident survey that's coming. And so that has gone out. The actual surveys should be coming in the next week. There'll be, after a couple weeks, another copy of the survey if you didn't send it in the first time, and a reminder postcard. All of those things will be happening over the next about 4 weeks. And then by the end of March, they'll be able to assemble the information. We should be getting reports in May. So.
How many surveys is in the sample?
It's around 3,000. So it's, if you have 7,500 approximate households in the city. A whole lot of people get them.
Final note, and I'll try to make this brief, just responding to a couple of council comments in the past about trying to provide some different police information. I know we send out a tremendous amount of information around issues that have happened, crimes that have happened, and so an opportunity to talk about some other update-related information from our police. Just give our chief maybe a second to come up and talk just for a second, if possible. Just for a second.
Just start off with a couple of things. From the last quarter, we are, and I talked about this briefly, I think, last time. We are down 4 sworn positions at this point. We're hopefully getting 2 positions through the next academy, which will start very shortly. And that's the only 2 slots we have. And we'll probably look at some laterals and some other options. We still have a couple dispatch positions open, and unfortunately, Andrew Gucciardo is leaving us to move on to bigger and better things in the Midwest, the cold Midwest, and we have advertised that position in a week. It's been out for a week, and we have something like 67 applicants already, so we should be able to fill that one fairly quickly. So staffing is a little bit short, but we're still managing to keep our head above water. Some good news. There was an incident in the District of Columbia last weekend involving the carjacked vehicle from Sycamore. Some arrests were made in the District of Columbia, and it turns out those are the suspects, or at least one of the suspects we had already been looking at in that case, so we anticipate some charges coming out of that. We believe it's going to close at least 2 robberies in the city, and probably they're responsible for the 3 street robberies in addition to the other carjacking. But at this point, we just can't say. It's still under investigation. The burglary trend has sort of died down. Knock on wood.
That's not wood.
I know, but it's the best. It's wood byproducts underneath it. Somewhere in there, there's some wood. One of the other thing is we had a rash of We had 2 commercial armed robbery or commercial robberies involving phone stores, and 1 theft, and we've identified those subjects as well. They're responsible for all 3 of those, and probably responsible for several in the county and in Prince George's County, but we don't know yet. But we are going to be obtaining charges for those very shortly. So that's the good news. As the crimes come up, we're working very well with DC. At this point, we have a pretty informal network, but it's very quick. It's real time almost, so that we can close some of these cases.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
No, it was on past items.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief. That's it.
Councilmember Seaton.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to check on the survey. Is the council going to get a copy of the survey, or could we get a copy of the survey? I know that we can't supply answers back to.
I'd love your answers. Yes, we had sent it out, but I'll send it out again so that you see the final version.
Great, thank you.
I'm going to get one.
You'll get some of our answers because a couple of us are going to get
I
it.
found out by postcard today.
I got my postcard.
Oh, finally, Bruce.
Yes, finally.
He felt left out in past years.
Especially when some colleagues got 2 in a row. Councilmember Schultz, you had something else?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Mr. Kenner's comments about these upcoming meetings with department heads, to really just remind people that this meeting, the first one, there's 2 of them, so half the departments will be reviewed in the first one, and half will talk to us in the second. That these are public meetings. Those meetings will be held here, and these are this is a new approach that we're taking, that in response to council's feeling that we can do a different and better job of approaching the annual city budget process. And so I think it's exciting, and opportunity. I think the department heads are probably, well, I can't speak for them. I hope they're looking forward to the opportunity for them to have our attention undivided on the kind of things that Mr. Kenner was talking about. So I encourage folks to come out to these meetings because you'll probably be able to learn a lot of interesting stuff.
Does the city manager have anything else? Okay, so I think we're all set with that. Thank you very much. Next item is adoption of minutes. We have one set of minutes from February 3rd. Does somebody want to move adoption?
I want to move it with one additional sentence that I provided to the city clerk earlier today regarding a comment that I made asking about supermajority requirement in state law when it comes to zoning matters.
Okay. With that amendment, it's been moved. Is there a second? Do I hear a second?
One of you guys.
Okay, seconded by Councilmember Siemens. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. That's unanimous. We will now move to our regular voting agenda. The first item is item number 1, and that's the first reading ordinance amending the ethics ordinance. And Mr. Sigmund is here.
Good evening. This amendment to the city's ethics chapter is intended to reflect a change in state law which excludes holdings in mutual funds from the definition of a business interest, and as a result that it excludes mutual funds from the council's annual financial disclosure statement requirements. And the Ethics Commission has endorsed this change. The Commission does not believe that the council members' holdings in a publicly traded mutual fund has a potential to create a conflict of interest, because there's nothing that the city council or the city can do that would influence a mutual fund in such a way that would have a material impact on the council members' finances. So no risk of a conflict of interest, and therefore it doesn't make sense to require you to disclose that personal financial information.
And can you just say a word or two? There was earlier during public comments, there was a suggestion about potential amendments to this ethics ordinance. Can you just say a little word about kind of how the process runs with the current alignment of our ethics law and the state ethics law, and kind of the process that we use to bring it through the Ethics Commission and with the State Ethics Commission?
Yes, all changes to the city ethics law need to be approved by the State Ethics Commission. I have submitted the proposed amendment that's before you to the Commission's General Counsel, who reviewed it and said she sees no problems, and she's submitting it to the State Commission for formal approval. We can make other changes. Our law just has to be at least as stringent as the state law on certain points. So we could make changes such as stricter penalties and or prohibiting the use of city email for campaign purposes expressly, if we wanted to do that.
And if we were to do something like that, are there kind of, I just want to make sure that we understand the process that we've used or that we're required to use. Let's say if we added anything like that, would that need to, do we generally run that through our Ethics Commission for their recommendation? And then separate from that answer, it sounds like that we then would send that along to the legal counsel for the State Ethics Commission, and they would kind of give a preliminary thumbs up or down, and then there would be formal action on the part of the State Ethics Commission.
Correct. And yes, it is the city's practice to share proposed amendments with the Ethics Commission, and sometimes the Ethics Commission generates its own recommendations.
Okay. Other council comments? Seeing none, remind me. Did we move this? We didn't move this. Okay, does somebody want to move
I'd like
this?
to move it. I have a question.
Sure, well, it's been moved by Councilmember Siemens.
Second.
Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Grimes. Question, Councilmember Siemens.
The suggestions that were made tonight, will those be forwarded to the Ethics Commission to see if they want to take action on it?
If we decide that we want to send them to them.
I would suggest that we do send it to them.
The State Ethics Commission?
No, the city's Ethics Commission, to see if they were going to recommend that we take action on those suggestions.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and that's without bias. I mean, I'm not trying to say that we should or shouldn't, but I think that we should, when suggestions are brought forward, I think that the Ethics Commission should look at them and decide whether to make a recommendation or not.
Okay. And I can say that generally the use of city resources for campaign purposes is prohibited. That's considered a personal use. Email, I don't know how the law would be applied there, email addresses.
Councilmember Grimes.
I thank Ms. Tunis for bringing her concerns to the council. She and I had previously had an exchange by email about them, and part of that exchange was her concern about the use of city email accounts for campaign purposes. I pointed out to her that our current ethics law, not even the amended one, the current one, prohibits the use of, I believe it was the prestige of office, did I get those words right, for campaign purposes. I interpret the use of city email to be part of the prestige of office. Therefore, my conclusion is that the use of city resources, including email, business cards, and so on, for campaign purposes is already prohibited. Before forwarding that particular point to the Ethics Commission, I would welcome your investigation of it.
Sure. Like I said, I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but I think it is definitely implicated in the law already.
So if there's not objection, sounds like we would like to hear back from both you and the Ethics Commission on those potential changes.
Okay.
Okay, back to the item that's on the floor. Any further comment? Okay, that's a first reading, so it can be a voice vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. The next item is first reading ordinance amending the Tacoma Park Code to opt out of Montgomery County tree protection and tree canopy preservation regulations. Would somebody like to move this ordinance?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilmember Smith, second by Councilmember Grimes. Is there council discussion? Just a reminder that this is one piece in a broader discussion that we're going to have about the relationship of the city to the county and which regulations we opt in and which we opt out. So this one is a standalone piece, but it's in that larger context. Any council comments? Seeing none, it's a first reading. We'll voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it, unanimous. Next item is a first reading ordinance authorizing FY 2014 budget amendment number 4. Would somebody like to move this first reading ordinance?
I'll move it.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Schultz, seconded by Councilmember Smith. I guess if the deputy city manager wants to go through this, and then if we can get some comments from the city manager about various people's questions about adding something.
Thank you. As we do, we try to keep our budget up to date with the various things that happen throughout the course of the year, so that we're keeping track of our budget and staying within what the council wishes us to do. I do want to note that in the first bullet, there's information about the Flower Avenue Green Street project and funds that have been received during this fiscal year. I did do a typo on this one. I just want you to know that where it says near the bottom approximately $25,000, this should be approximately $35,000. It does not affect the actual text of the ordinance. This item is that we did receive money, $10,000 from the Chesapeake Bay Trust for the Flower Avenue Green Street project that we expected last fiscal year, and it did not come within that time frame, so we're acknowledging it now. And also we are receiving, earlier than we expected, some reimbursement from the Maryland State Highway Administration on the design and engineering expenses that we have incurred so far on the project. We are acknowledging in the Police Department's general fund forfeiture account that we've received more money than we had budgeted for. We always just plug a number in because we don't know what gets forfeited as a result of various activities. And this time we underestimated. So we've received about $35,000 from that.
Can you explain what the forfeiture account is?
Actually, I'll turn that over to Chief Goldberg.
Actually, there's two forfeiture
Right,
accounts.
there's two here on this, yeah.
Yeah, there's two forfeiture accounts. The 30,000 plus that we're talking about here is from property that is auctioned or forfeited, not drug-related or seized from gambling or drugs. The next, just so I don't...
Yeah, go ahead.
The next one, which you'll see a larger amendment, is actually the Drug Enforcement Fund from drug seizures. And that one is required to be utilized back by the police department for drug enforcement activities.
That comes from the Department of Justice.
Well, that one particularly does, but it could come just from our own department. It's just usually those amounts aren't quite as big.
Okay.
If I could, a follow-up question with that. So you're saying that first amount, though, is for recovered items that are not claimed?
It could be recovered items not claimed. It could be cars that, are auctioned off that, are never claimed after the period of time. It can be money that's found. It can be a lot of things that...
But basically property that isn't...
But it's property that's
recovered, that's not
non-drug-related
been-
seizures, correct. So that can go in the general fund while the other funds cannot.
Thank you.
Also related to the police department is the next item, which has to do with speed camera fines. We budgeted the estimate that we thought we would receive at about $1.5 million. We believe now that it's going to be likely a little closer to $1.8 million. I think part of the reason is that we've had the problem with the bridge reconstruction on New Hampshire Avenue and the missing traffic signal, which has kept the revenue that we've gotten from the New Hampshire Avenue traffic speed cameras a little higher than we expected. And since that bridge reconstruction project is not likely to be finished until the end of the current year, we're expecting higher revenue. We also have a transfer of $20,000 into the exterior home repair program. These were funds that were originally put forward for the food support program. Council large grant instead provided that $20,000, so the $20,000 is being moved into the exterior home repair program where there's a lot of demand. One of the things that's new here that I want to alert you to is that we are looking at upgrading our cable equipment to high-definition equipment. And so we've got additional funds of about $177,000 for that and for a variety of other city TV or wiring-related projects. This all comes from our cable grant capital fund, which we can only spend on these kinds of projects, and which we have about $2 million in the bank. So we're touching 10% of it, I think, for this fiscal year. I do want to come back at some point and talk with you a little bit about the issue of high definition, because at some point we may need to make a decision about, do we continue to broadcast in standard definition, or do we at some point switch to high definition as a broadcast of our council meetings and of our other activities. And this has to do with negotiations with our cable companies and how all of those things work out, because we can't just do it on our own. Yeah, we want the best pictures possible of our council members.
Yeah, well, we need help to do that.
Yeah, I'm not sure we want the best pictures possible.
Yeah, if there's something lower than standard, we'll go there.
Yes.
Not doing that. The next item is paying for water usage at Lee Jordan Field. We have a memorandum of understanding with the school district, just as we do with park and planning, to pay for water at the two fields, and at Ed Wilhelm and at Lee Jordan. That amount was not incorporated in the budget and needs to be for this fiscal year. We've got higher revenue and fees and contractor payments for recreation department programs, primarily because we're having larger demand for some of our programs. Many of the ways that we have contractors paid is kind of by the number of members, and so they might get a higher pay because they've got a larger class size. So we've got higher numbers for that, especially for programs out of the New Hampshire Avenue Rec Center. And anytime you have additional people signing up through our ActiveNet program, we have to pay out more to the ActiveNet system. Our revenue is greater, but we also have to pay first those transaction and credit card fees. And then we have a number of expenses, primarily for the Human Resources Division. They have a number of things that had not been anticipated at the price that they put in the budget. In particular, we have a higher cost for a compensation survey, for workers' compensation insurance, and for recruitment costs. And then there's a variety of kind of smaller task lines that they wanted to straighten out within their division. The total additional amount needed for them is $50,235.
So those larger items are increased costs for those, not the whole item.
That's right. This is the increased amount for these items.
Can I ask a question?
Uh-huh.
On the fireproof cabinet for confidential files,
yeah.
I assume, but I want to ask if my assumption's right, that you have the alternative of digitizing these confidential files, don't you? And so that they can be kept in that manner?
That's a good question. I'm not sure about that. There are a variety of requirements related to the I-9 immigration and the medical files, and I'm not sure if it is something that we certainly don't have the capacity right now to digitize them in the confidential way that's needed, but it may be something that we can move to in the future. They're not at that point right now.
Yeah, because I think it could save us some
money. Right, and certainly for anything old, we want to move towards that digitization. I think we really absolutely are all committed to that.
Okay. Thanks.
As we go through in the rest of the agenda packet, it talks about how much money is transferred in the general fund, increase in revenues in the general fund, increase in expenditures in the general fund, the special revenue fund, which has to do with the Department of Justice equitable sharing program, forfeiture program, and the cable grant, and then the speed camera fund. The speed camera fund, I do want to mention that not only is the revenue going to be increased by about $294,000 than we anticipated, but we also do have to pay more to the company that we pay for the maintenance of the program for the increased number of tickets. Basically, on the total fiscal impact, general fund revenues increased by $116,800. General fund expenditures increased by $79,399. Revenues for the special revenue fund increased by $53,969. Expenditures for that fund increased by $177,250. And revenues for the speed camera fund increased by $294,000, while expenditures for the speed camera fund increased by $129,360. I ask your approval of the budget amendment at first reading.
Thank you for that lengthy explanation.
Sorry about that.
And I believe somebody we moved it and seconded it, right?
Yes.
Okay. Any council questions? If the city manager would like to provide us a little bit of information pertaining to the requests that we've had from a number of directions about potential addition to this pertaining to sidewalk work.
Yes, and I think I also got a question from Councilmember Mail earlier, sort of, I guess, voicing some additional opinions from residents, and you know, as we've sort of communicated to Councilmember Mail, the importance, I think, of the implications of this additional delay in the Sligo Creek area with the bridge delay is important to consider. The other challenge that we have is that I guess we have a sort of a process in place around how traffic calming and sidewalk construction projects get into the queue effectively for each year. So we're in fiscal year 14 right now, and we've got 3 remaining projects in that queue for design work, and then we've got 1 in the queue for construction work. And that's, again, if you think about it in terms of when we can do some of these things, you know, we tend to try to do as much design work as we can and as much construction work as we can when the weather allows. And so we've got, for the remainder of fiscal year 14, we sort of have the spring and early summer to think about completing the design and the construction work before we sort of head into fiscal year 15. We've got some additional projects already slated in fiscal year 15 with the Elm Avenue sidewalks already scheduled, at least for design right now, in fiscal year 15. And again, fiscal year 15 is really just the late summer for this calendar year. In sort of talking about it a little bit with staff, it looks like it would be difficult for us to try to necessarily move this project, move the Elm Avenue project up for design in fiscal year 14. One is that we've only got a few months remaining in that, and 2, we've got some projects that are already there. We talked to Councilmember Mail about a few options that might be available as it relates to trying to make sure that we do both design and construction as much as possible in fiscal year 15. Our experience has been that we try to make sure we've got enough time for design and construction, so thus far we haven't had that many sidewalk projects that have been able to be completed in one fiscal year, either because of weather and or just some of the particularly in the design process, it just takes a little bit of time sometimes, depending upon community concerns and resident input in the process. And so we've talked about trying to see if we can make sure that we do it in fiscal year 15. We also just chatted very briefly with the council member about if there would be possible to do some sort of a swap out of a design project that we currently have in fiscal year 14 for the Elm Avenue design project in fiscal year 14. So again, it's in 15 now, so we'd just be moving one up into 14 and probably moving something in fiscal year 14 back to fiscal year 15. So we have talked in general about some of those options right now.
And were there also some concerns about not only staff ability under normal circumstances, but there's going to be some reduction because of some status of employees that could reduce some capacity?
Reduction isn't exactly the word.
Well, expansion, but reduction.
We have one of our, as many of you know, our special projects coordinator, who does lots of things, including Safe Grow and many of our sidewalk construction projects, is going to have a baby here in the next 2 weeks, and so she's going to be out just for a little bit of time, which may impact our ability to. Certainly, we've got enough in the way of sidewalk and traffic calming design and construction in fiscal year 14, so we just want to make sure that we have enough resources to be able to cover all of that.
So if I can just summarize in a way, I've been talking with Councilmember Mail and with the city manager about the potential for moving up this design phase into 14 and understanding the implications of that, wanting to make sure that the council understands kind of not taking that just in a vacuum and saying, oh, well, there are very good reasons for doing that because of safety concerns in the neighborhood, and kind of wanting to do that, but also knowing that we have all of these other projects in the queue, and we've had a process to put them there, and understanding the implications of bumping those or moving those, and wanting to make sure that there is staff capacity to do it. So I would say, on my own part, I hope there's a way that we can make this happen in as expedited a fashion as possible because of that externality of the delay in the New Hampshire Avenue Bridge project that just makes this much more compelling than just a project that needs to move up without that.
I just would also just want to just underscore that Councilmember Mail in no way implied that there should be any change in any order or any prioritization. That was not his intent.
Okay. Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you. It's going to be a request concerns this issue. In Councilmember Mail's absence, would you please, noting that this is going to require 2 readings, would you please estimate the cost that would be involved in design for this particular sidewalk project and bring it to the next reading of this ordinance? And you know, my assumption is that this could be paid for 10 times over by the speed camera money that we are excessive.
Yeah, to be clear, so this isn't a cost issue.
Yes, I understand that.
This is a staff resource and timing issue. And again, we are in February and our fiscal year ends in July. And so our new fiscal year 15 starts in July, and that's when we currently have scheduled to do the design work. And I'm looking at our Public Works Director, and I believe it's $35,000 is the cost to do the actual design.
That's pretty definitive then. Okay, good enough.
There was some question I had, but I don't remember what it is. Other council comments on this budget amendment? I'll think of what my other question was later. It'll be too late. So this is a first reading ordinance, and it's scheduled to come back in 2 weeks. So all those in favor of this first reading ordinance, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. That passes unanimously. We will move to resolution adopting a revised community grants program. Would somebody like to move this resolution?
I move it.
I'll second it.
Moved by Councilmember Grimes, second by Councilmember Schultz. I think we've had a fairly lengthy discussion of this. I think that all of our discussion has been incorporated into this resolution. I see some lights from council members, so I'll go to Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that tonight at the community comments session, Elizabeth Wallace came forward and suggested that we broaden the types of grants to include science, technology, environment, and mathematics. Yeah, I think that is an admirable suggestion, and I would like to ask that we incorporate an amendment to add that as a was it 5th category. We currently have the mini grants, arts and cultural events, program and operational support, and capital projects, and I would like to suggest that we also add the STEM projects.
And how much would you recommend?
These are just placeholder amounts anyways, so I would suggest that we talk about amounts at the budget, the time of budget.
I had the same thought, except that I would have included it, I would have extended the arts and cultural events category without additional funding.
Yeah, that's what
I would add arts and cultural events and STEM programming to that category instead of creating a separate category. Noting again that these are placeholder amounts, and so that 60,000 could get extended.
Right.
In other words,
as the mover of the of the resolution, I
Oh,
would
okay.
encourage you to go ahead and
I
make
guess you're in
that
charge right this
proposal.
moment. I'll second your motion then. Did you make a motion?
No, you made the motion, so you go ahead
did.
and make the change as you see fit.
Right, so the motion is that we add STEM programming written out as necessary to the arts and cultural events category to make it arts and cultural events and STEM programming.
I was just going to point out that can be, or projects that would fall under the STEM category could also be incorporated as examples in any of the other grant programs. So you wouldn't necessarily need to have a whole new category. Capital projects, operating and programming, it could all
Sounds
fall
sensible.
into those.
Yeah, the main point, I think, is to explicitly recognize it so that people will feel invited to submit proposals. That would be fine, too.
Yeah, I would suggest to go ahead and, as you would,
Why don't
as you
we
had
just
talked
direct
about,
Ms.
just adding
Daines
that to the arts and cultural. I mean, I think when we just say arts and cultural, it implies a limitation, and by adding the STEM in there, it makes it clear that it's open to the other types.
Well,
Especially given Tacoma Park's long history of arts and cultural events.
I feel comfortable with arts and cultural, that's what you're saying.
I'm saying added into
Yeah.
arts and cultural. Add STEM.
So to be clear, adding arts and cultural events and STEM-related programming in some way to that, to the description of that line.
As a seconder, Mr. Schultz, would you?
You would rather make it more general.
No, it's a long title, but we can come up with
You
something.
can weasel word it down to where it
Yeah.
feels good.
Easily done.
You could drop out arts because that's cultural.
That's
Like
what I was going to
cultural and
say. You
STEM,
could do
yeah.
cultural and science events and
Right.
programming.
Yeah, just eliminate arts and culture, just put in STEM. I'm kidding. No, I think.
We could do that.
I will agree to an amendment that says cultural and STEM, since I'm the seconder on this.
Okay. Is there any other discussion on this proposal? Do we want to go ahead and call for the vote then? This is a, see, I don't have all these notes the mayor gets. Is this a single? Maybe I do.
Give him out 10 seconds.
This is a resolution, so no, I'm not giving him time. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, it's unanimous then. Let's move on to the consent agenda.
Go ahead.
Welcome back.
Keep going.
You're doing great.
Would somebody like to move the consent agenda, which is the first 4 items?
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll move it.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of the consent agenda? Let's see, it's a roll call vote. Clerk has to call a roll.
Mayor Williams?
Aye.
Councilmember Grimes?
Yes.
Councilmember Mail? Councilmember Daniels Cohen? Councilmember Siemens?
Aye.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Schultz?
Aye.
Consent agenda passes unanimously. We'll now take up agenda item number 5E, which is the single reading ordinance awarding a contract for lighting efficiency upgrades in the community center. That's been requested to be pulled. I think the Public Works Director might have some information, or the city manager, whoever's going to do it.
Sent some information in. I apologize for its lateness. Later this afternoon, that provides a little bit more background on the LED lighting upgrade request. Also, I think in front of you, you have a more detailed even memo than what I provided by the Public Works Director that hopefully tries to explain a few things. Just in short, this project is going to be funded from an MEA grant that we've already received. I think there might have been just a little bit of confusion. So there are 2 phases for this. We're only talking about the first phase, which is funded from the grant for roughly a little bit over $26,000. We've got until May of 2014 to spend the MEA funds. And the memo talks a little bit more about some of the cost-benefit analysis, but in short, making these LED lighting exchanges from the current lighting system that the city has at its community center will reduce the overall electricity usage by 44% annually. That translates into roughly $8,000 a year. So we're hopeful that the project really pays for itself within 3 to 4 years. In addition, this project is eligible for a rebate by PEPCO. We'll look at the Public Works Director and say we have some confidence that we will actually get a rebate from PEPCO on not only this phase but on a future phase, the phase 2. But even if we don't get the rebate from PEPCO, the city's recommendation, staff's recommendation would be to go forward with this simply from the reduced electricity usage, as well as how this project would fit into the city's plan to reduce its electricity usage by 15% over the next 5 years, as was discussed when we had an energy audit that was performed for the city. So hopefully that answers at least some of the questions, and I know folks probably haven't had as much time to maybe look at some of the more detailed information which talks about some of the specific kilowatt electricity usage reductions that would occur. One other thing just to add is that even with just phase 1 of this project, it's actually going to reduce the city's electricity usage, if I get this right, by about 11%, just making this change on an annual basis. So it is not an insignificant reduction in electricity usage that the city is contemplating going towards.
Okay. Does somebody want to move this ordinance?
I'll move the ordinance.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Siemens, second by Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm very familiar with the cost savings that can be realized by implementation of more advanced lighting than the incandescent lights that have been used throughout many of our homes and businesses in the past. And so I fully support this. But I will also use this as an opportunity to say I think that we as a city, as we look at advancing our environmental sustainability, that we work aggressively with our local businesses and maybe even our residents to move to the more energy efficient lighting. In particular, the small businesses can take advantage of the same PEPCO rewards for moving to LED fixtures. And small businesses, in fact, have an even greater incentive to do that. So I don't know when we're going to get our sustainability coordinator, but I think it's going to be important for them to look at this in the near term while PEPCO still has that program in place. Thank you.
And PEPCO was here a number of months ago and presented on that very program. So for anybody who's looking for information on that, there's information on the city's website, there's information on PEPCO's website, and there's the presentation from PEPCO from that meeting from some number of months ago, probably September.
And for small businesses, it's almost free.
Mm-hmm. Councilmember, there was another light. It disappeared. Other council comments? Okay. This is a single reading ordinance and therefore requires a roll call. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens?
Aye.
Councilmember Schultz?
Aye.
Councilmember Mayo? Councilmember Grimes?
Yes.
Councilmember Daniels Cohen? Mayor Williams?
Aye. We'll take a short break and we'll come back for our work session items, which are the legislative update and the quarterly report.
Just in time.
out summary of some items, just to give you a heads up. We've got, we're following, of course, the one bill that we've particularly put forward, which has to do with the Tacoma Bark Class B on and off sale alcoholic beverage license. And in about a week, we'll have hearings on that. Mayor Williams will testify on the 17th, and Councilmember Grimes on the 21st. We don't see any problems with this, so I'm just letting you know we're continuing to be ready to go for that. There's two bills that I want to bring up that are having hearings this week. One has to do with the AEDs in law enforcement vehicles, which we have taken a position against and testified at the before the Montgomery delegation. There is a hearing on this in a Senate committee on Thursday. It's a little strange to have this. It's a little out of order because normally it goes to the full Montgomery delegation for voting. So we're not sure what's going on. I've gotten calls from folks, from other lobbyists from other jurisdictions saying that they've talked to staff in Ana Sol Gutierrez's office who seem, maybe it'll go forward, to the Land Use Committee this week and then the delegation, but there's not even meetings scheduled. And so it's very strange. We will be testifying. Chief Goldberg will appear. We have filled out our fiscal impact statement, which is relatively strong because it is expensive to implement AEDs all at once in all of our vehicles. It is an unfunded mandate. We do think that AEDs are good things. There's several things that we will ask for in addition to opposing it. We can also say that if it does go forward, we'd like to have municipalities in Montgomery County exempted. We'd like to phase it in over 5 or 7 years so that we don't have to purchase them all at once and then when they have to get the next round of them, that it's not a hit all at once. So we have a variety of things to put forward, and I think that, and we'll see how that all goes. It doesn't seem well organized. There's another item I just mentioned here. There is a proposal, a bill affecting the Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights, and has to do with the hearing board. And the City of Tacoma Park, unfortunately, has had some experience with this. But the proposal in this bill is that even minor technicalities could cause evidence of being excluded. And so it could be that you didn't say your full name or some other kind of thing. It's not a constitutional kind of an issue. It's a really minor thing. Could put a police department in an awkward place by having some information excluded if there's an officer that is being charged with having some kind of a problem. And I do know that the police departments around are opposing this bill. As from a staff level, we would recommend opposing, but at this point we're not planning on taking a position. I'm just letting you know about that. If you want some more information, I'm happy to share that.
Just on that one, the chiefs, the Maryland police chiefs are opposing, therefore MML said they would take no position and let the chiefs carry the ball. But I did have a long conversation with our chief who expressed a number of those reservations about this bill.
Right. There's some fairly good documentation about kind of the implications of this that I've seen presented, I think, from Chief Manger's office, that if somebody wants, we can forward that on to you. But it's really quite, this is a quite strong proposal. We knew that there would be a bunch of speed camera bills. We have testimony submitted for one that is being heard tomorrow. And then there will be a series. We're not sure what they will mean or if there's any traction on them, so we're monitoring them.
I can provide an update on that. You want me to do that
Please
now or
do.
later? The sense is that SB 652 is going to be the speed camera bill. They're all going to be consolidated into that one.
Okay.
and that it has a very good chance of passing, and that it will more than likely change the requirements for jurisdictions such as us who have contracts with vendors that are based on a per ticket basis, and make it so that it'll have to be on basically a fixed fee, and we'll have 3 years to make that change.
I see, okay.
And MML supported the bill.
I see, okay. One of the things that, in writing our testimony for this, if you have cameras placed in locations based on professionally done traffic studies, and you have calibrated and professional management of the speed camera system, it doesn't matter how you pay the contractor. It's how many cars are speeding get tickets. And, so there's not a way to bribe the system. If the cars are speeding, they can get a ticket. So just, for that thing, one of the things that I feel very good about, that Tacoma Park has a very well-managed speed camera system. We've not got complaints, works well, and I think that we actually are a model for the state in how to run a speed camera program, and we've shared that in our testimony.
I believe we calibrate on a daily basis, don't we?
We go out to the cameras on a daily basis, yes. And then they're audited, they're kind of separately checked annually, but we do go out every day to every camera.
And can I just ask, do we make, because I note in the record that we have the payment rate per month or per camera has gone up, but the per ticket, per citation has stayed flat. Do we typically pay per camera, or do we pay by citation? Because the contract is whichever is higher.
Everything that I've seen has been per citation.
And are any of the checks on the speed cameras done by someone other than the police department or the contractor? In other words, an independent reading?
No, except for once a year when we have an independent check on it. But we have a civilian employee that checks the cameras.
Okay, but the annual one is done by an independent. It's not a relationship with the vendor or with the...
I will double check.
Thank you.
One more. Okay. I found it interesting that there's a number of just cause eviction and retaliatory action items, bills that are that we didn't sponsor up front, that are before the General Assembly. We'll have language for them. I just wanted to go through them briefly. There's bills that have kind of the standard just cause eviction language that we've proposed in the past. There's one that Sheila Hickson has put forward, which has the standard just cause eviction language, but it also, actually, let me go back. Does anybody want a clarification of what just cause eviction is? We've gone through this many times, but I didn't know if everybody was up to speed on that. Okay. And the second one that Sheila Hickson has the standard just cause eviction language, but it also prohibits a landlord from requiring a tenant to carry renter's insurance, naming the landlord as beneficiary. I'd never heard of that that option before, but apparently somebody had. There's a bill that changes the time frame from 6 months to 12 months within which action could be deemed retaliatory, and another one that adds non-renewal of a lease to the termination of a lease as an action that may be deemed retaliation, but using the 6-month provision. So I just wanted to let you know that those are out there, and that since we've supported them and sponsored them in the past, that they're active.
Do you have any reading on how?
No, I'm going to find out tomorrow
Okay.
how they're going. And there's no hearings on those this coming week. So.
Okay, thank you.
I'm hoping that the mayor has the answer on the HUR bills.
I do, I think.
Okay, good. I will say that each time I read them, my eyes cross, and I try to look through the numbers, and I talk to folks, and I'm happy to turn the mic over to you.
My best understanding is that SB 664, which is the MACO bill, which is the one that has all of those percentages changing up and down from year to year to year, has the potential to go forward. The MML position ended up being support with amendment. They said that the numbers work in the long run. Kind of when you get to the end of the process, it keeps municipalities at least where we are now, plus a little bit. The difficulty with the bill is that it assumes the 16 million this year or next year and 8 million in a following year from that same place where we've been getting the money from the Secretary's budget, but doesn't find a source of the funds. Therefore, the questions have been, well, it works if there's that 8 million, where do you propose to get the money? And MML's answer is, it's not our bill, ask MACO. So it's to kind of pin down the sources of the money and say that at least as one potential way to get at this, the numbers kind of work.
Doesn't do it for me.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
it doesn't do it for me either.
Okay, well, we'll keep working on that. But that's helpful, thank you.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. So we would come out whole maybe through the process. Do the counties come out more than whole at the beginning?
They would come out a lot better than they do now because they're getting a whole lot less than we are because we're getting that special funding.
Okay.
But I would say that the main argument that seems to make the most sense for municipalities is to treat us differently than the counties because they have a lot more ways of raising money than we do. And so that argument has some resonance with legislators and with the governor, lieutenant governor, and the transportation secretary. They get it that we need more help than the counties do. And it's always helpful to remember that the counties are the ones who throw us under the bus on HURs to begin with.
Yeah, adding, to the confusion on this is kind of what's the number that they start with out of the base budget. And I've seen several different versions of taking the increase in the gas tax or doing different kinds of things with it. And so there may be some ways to finagle something reasonable for us.
And the sense seems to be, and the word is from the presiding officers, that it's not going to get fixed this legislative term.
Councilmember Schultz raised again the questions about the bottle bill, Senate Bill 394. I'm curious. I've looked through the bill. We've certainly looked at it from a fiscal impact statement. It didn't seem like it made a difference to us that way. To me, this is simply the question about does the council want to take a position on it. I'm not certain if it's something that can just be done by direction by you or if we need to do a resolution on it. It kind of depends on what the reasoning is for the council to take a position on it, if that's what you wish to do.
I support it, and it's in line with initiatives such as litter reduction and environmental sustainability.
Yeah, my sense is that it's a good bit different in concept than the bill that was put before the legislature a year ago, which most of the municipalities in the Montgomery chapter of MML were vehemently opposed to. I didn't read that bill, but I did read this one. That's Jamie Raskin is one of the sponsors of this bill. I think our concern last year as a city was that the proposed bottle bill would threaten the viability of our own recycling program and that of other municipalities who have municipal recycling of bottles and stuff like that. My own feeling is that it excludes a lot of bottles. It only includes bottles that have liquids in them, and it doesn't even include bottles of dairy or of wine or bottles of distilled spirits. It does include beer bottles and water bottles and the typical juice bottles, but everything else that's glass that contains foodstuffs and that sort of thing is not part of this bill. In other words, there wouldn't be redemptions. And of course, it has nothing to do with cans and other kinds of containers and paper and all that sort of stuff, which are a big part of our recycling thing. So, in general, just let me say that it's a complicated bureaucratic proposal that will involve the people that make or distribute the stuff and sell it in Maryland, starting with the manufacturer, through the distributor, through the retailer, to the customer. Everybody pays the 5 cents, and each party reimburses the one higher up on the ladder. So basically, the nickel goes all the way down to the consumer. But then the consumer can turn around and redeem the bottle and get his or her nickel back. And the money goes into a controller's fund, and any excess funds are going to be used to advance recycling in the state of Maryland. My own personal feeling is that while my personal family and many of my neighbors recycle lots and lots of bottles, I still find an unbelievable amount of bottles laying around the environment on the residential streets in our ward that just sit there for days and days on ends. And on New Hampshire Avenue, having walked it twice, doing a cleanup, that 2 mile or mile and a half stretch, the number of water bottles is just absolutely staggering that people pitch out the window. And nobody seems to want to pick them up, even though everybody hates the sight of them. So if this would help, I mean, it's a state problem. It's not a municipal problem. And, the individual municipalities, even if every last one of them all 153 of them, or whatever it is in the state, had great recycling programs, it's not going to scratch the surface of the bottle problems in the state of Maryland.
The way I heard it described, it was to get the incremental addition of people who don't recycle now into the mix. It wasn't going to make a change in people who already do, but it was going to add people who don't.
I support us taking a position on it through whatever process we need to go through to do so.
I would advocate our taking a favorable supporting position on it.
I agree.
Okay. 4 or so, okay.
A majority.
Okay. I'll do that. And I will double check and see if we need to bring it back next week. Similarly, Mayor, you forwarded to me House Bill 1243, Senate Bill 811, Local Business Investment Law. It certainly has a local connection with some of the prime people sponsoring it from Tacoma Park. I just got it late today. I know the city manager has not had a chance to look at it from an economic development perspective. So, but if there's a position or something I should be doing with it, I'd like to know.
Maybe I can provide a minute's background on it.
Sure.
Which is that a discussion has been going on probably for at least a year that has included the Old Tacoma Business Association, Patty Baker, Preston Quisenberry, Lord Jarkudian, whom you all know, my wife Franca Brilliant, and other people have floated in and out about ways to support community investment in community businesses. That is local investment. That's very much part of the Tacoma Park ethos. And what they arrived at was this idea of legislation that would change the way that people can invest in corporations, in businesses in Maryland. So it would apply only to Maryland residents making investments in Maryland businesses. What it would allow is investments of $100, a small amount. So it's not targeting, what is the U.S. government call them qualified investors who have to have like $1 million. It's about community investments, and the idea is that people in the community will invest in community businesses, which can collect up to $100,000. So it's small scale in the investments. It's moderately small scale in what a business can receive, and it would allow those to be interest-bearing investments, where a lot of the crowdfunding schemes that are available on the internet now are either donations or non-interest-bearing loans. So these would be interest-bearing. And that's what it's about. And it was introduced by Senator Raskin and Delegate Hucker. And I support it.
I would support it too.
So is there a limitation on the number of rounds?
$100,000 at a time. Only a single bit of fundraising investment opportunity at a single time.
But for that $100,000, can you only do it annually, quarterly?
I don't know.
I think it's annually is what I think I read from Franca's memo. Per year, $100,000 per year. My feeling is, and I guess it's because of my background in lending, is that the only information I have is an email that I got today. And while in general it sounds like a swell idea, intriguing, I just don't understand how it's supposed to work. And I'm sure that it's been thought of by people who are behind this bill, but no one's shared that information with me, and I'd like to understand what it is I would be supporting if I were to support it.
I'd be happy to, I support it, and I would be happy to see the city move towards supporting it. I think the mechanisms of how it works, to some extent, those are questions that go beyond us. To me, the relevance of this bill is first that somebody at the state level would have to decide how it works from an investment perspective, from a securities management perspective. But if it did work, what it could result in is local money supporting local businesses to have better capacity, better infrastructure, expansion of capacity, expansion of services. And those are all desirable outcomes to me from a community perspective. So assuming that the merits of the actual exchange, the actual security exchange, are not something that ultimately are what we would endorse, I think endorsing the bill or just endorsing the part of it that we support this legislation because it would, if successful, result in more investment, more local investment in the community is something that I believe in. But if it takes more work to get more background, I think that's worth doing too.
We can bring it back next week.
And that's
It would need
timely because
a resolution. There's a
Yeah.
hearing on the 20th, so that would be
so-
fine.
So next week is fine.
Yeah.
I'm inclined to support it, but any additional information would be helpful.
I'll suggest to the proponents that they have someone here at the meeting.
Well, either that or just provide us with surely people have done their diligence making this. I mean,
That's correct. There was a long process that arrived at this, and this isn't the only thing they arrived at. For instance, you surely know the Washington Area Community Investment Fund.
Right.
Another part of the overall effort is to investigate setting up a local fund. That is, local donors would put money into WACIF that would be designated for local investments here. That's a different sort of approach. It's not just a single approach they're pursuing. Okay. And there have been other community members, for instance, Stuart Sarkozy-Bonozzi, who has some expertise in international development and funding, has been involved in this, and some other people. Don't need to go into that, though.
So how did you arrive at the $100,000?
Don't ask me.
Okay, so we'll
bring
get
it
something back on that next week.
That's all I have for
I can provide an update on a couple things. SB 629, which is the vehicle registration surcharge, up to $20, county gets first whack at it. MML is opposing the bill. The HB 492, which is the special tax rate bill, MML is opposing it because it's trying to take away a power that we already have. And it was interesting to kind of hear the conversation about those powers that we have, that municipalities have come up with 55 different ways to set different tax rates based on a class of property. And an example of how this was used last year was that Hyattsville set up a class of property for multifamily apartment buildings where they were going to provide extra special services for a big apartment building in town, and they were going to hire a police officer who was going to be dedicated to that, and they wanted to be able to charge a slightly higher tax rate for that building than all of the other classes of property in town, and they were able to do so. And you can also use it to charge a lesser rate to a class of property that you define. And so it was interesting to realize the ability that municipalities have that counties do not have in the state of Maryland, where we can define classes of property and tax them at different rates.
We define a class as abandoned houses with trees through their roofs?
Or
just abandoned properties?
It's possible that abandoned properties could be a class. It sounds like you can be creative in how you do it, and as long as you're not, targeting a particular person or a particular property, but you have a rationale for it on a service basis or something else, you can go higher or lower depending on what you define. So we don't want to lose that ability. SB 913, House Bill 1369 is the effort by a number of municipal officials over the last year to come up with to craft some additional changes to the state ethics law. SB 913 is sponsored by Senator Raskin. He was the original sponsor of the state ethics bill change that made it so that we have to be, exactly aligned with the state as opposed to just essentially aligned with them. And the House sponsor is Delegate Gilchrist. I was involved in a number of conversations with the delegate and another delegate in Annapolis last week. This was a late filed bill because the deadline for the House bills was 5 p.m. Thursday, and this was filed Friday, so they had to go before the Rules Committee today to get this on the floor. I was convinced, I hadn't been convinced up until this point that this was necessarily something that we cared about, but I heard convincing arguments from the proponents for it, and this is essentially to make two small changes in the state ethics law. One would be to exempt having to report real property outside the state unless it was bought from somebody who had done business with the city in the last 10 years. And the example was having to provide an address for a property owned in, far removed from Maryland, where it can be associated with the particular official. And kind of the example was, gee, then people would know where that place is. I have, teenage daughters, they go there, they would know where it is, they could target individuals. So it was kind of a security issue. And I hadn't thought of it in that way before. It made a certain amount of sense when explained to me. And the other one was exempting information that's required to be provided by relatives of the official to where it's confidential information that is part of the filing is held by the municipality and can be released to the, it can be looked at, released to the Ethics Commission for the municipality and to the state and to a court if there is some question, but kind of providing a little bit extra security around that additional information. So these were all concerns basically about the release of that information, because if it's like the rest of it, somebody can just walk in and request copies and publish it on the internet, and it's out there, and identity theft and all that. So that bill is now in, and Senator Raskin believes that those are reasonable changes to make in the state ethics law that he pushed. That's the additional ones I've got. Any questions, other bills, observations? Councilmember Grimes.
Yeah, I have maybe four. One is just a watch out for this one. Delegate Hickson is considering introducing a bill that would be called the Child Safe Playing Fields Act that would restrict the use of pesticides in situations where children would be exposed to them in Maryland. There is some conflict there over state law that already requires integrated pest management for schools, so that is something that would need to be resolved. She has not introduced that yet. There are two different marijuana bills. All four of the District 20 representatives support both of them. One of them would decriminalize, introduced by Delegate Mazier, that's HB 879, and the other, and the other that would legalize, which is HB 880, Senate Bill 658. I would ask the city to support both of them, just as our delegates support both of them.
What's the latter one?
One of them would legalize.
Right, but the number.
Oh, the number, HB 880. And you can find the cross file to SB 658.
I haven't read the decriminalization or either bill, but does it say anything about how the money will be distributed to municipalities?
I don't know.
I could tell you that without reading them. It won't be.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sometimes. Okay. Sometimes they say, okay, the money will put into prevention programs or whatever it is. I don't know. I just support them on the principle of either decriminalization or legalization. The reason for Delegate Mazier's introduction of a decriminalization bill is the fear that the legalization bill won't pass, and she has her own agenda in any case. Not hearing an outcry here.
Are people feeling like that's something you want to take a position on?
No.
A little hand movement of people who want to take a position on those bills?
Well, I haven't read either one of them.
Or want them brought forward?
We'd have to bring this up next week in a resolution, right? So.
Right, I see no harm in doing that.
So
I'd say no harm in bringing it up next week.
Sounds like people want to look at them next week. I'll just say I'm inclined not to take a position, but it's not that I'm against anything. I just feel like there's
So am I.
there's larger there's giants battling on this one at another level. We're not going to have much effect, but
I do suspect, and Councilmember Siemens has asked Police Chief Goldberg for data on enforcement here in Tacoma Park, and I don't think we've gotten it. I don't remember the exact request, but looking at patterns of arrest, I don't see any reason to suspect that we are any different from any other place in the disproportionate impact that arrests or criminal citations for possession of small amounts, we're talking about 10 grams or less, that's less than half an ounce, minorities and economically disadvantaged people suffer disproportionately in the enforcement of these laws, and that includes in Tacoma Park, so far as I can tell. Okay, so you're going to bring it back after people will have a chance to read these. My last item is I note that there is a state minimum wage bill that was introduced at the request of Governor O'Malley. That's HB 295, SB 331. It has its hearings tomorrow and on Thursday. I support these. I think that this is a case where the City of Tacoma Park support is going to not make any difference one way or the other. I did receive a call because I had signed a petition last week from a former city employee, Lonnie Moffett, who's working for people who are recruiting businesses to support this because the restaurant food service industry is opposing these minimum wage bills. I would be quite happy for the city to support these bills, but as I said, I don't think the city support would make a huge amount of difference.
Is this the 1010 vote?
Yes, it would raise the minimum wage in Maryland to $10.10 by as of July 1st, 2016, with 2 steps before then, and then after then it would be adjusted on a yearly basis.
It's indexed.
Yes, and by the way, the District 20 representatives, with the exception of Delegate Mazier, support this. Delegate Mazier, really, as a gubernatorial candidate, released an economic program that calls for the state of Maryland to adopt a living wage, which is higher than a minimum wage. That would be great, but this is what's in the state legislature this year.
So is there interest in bringing that, or are you just raising that?
I would love to have the city support it, but to be honest, once again, I don't see that city support's going to make a whole lot of difference here.
I'm happy to support that one. My other question, though, for staff was, what happens when we endorse something? Who do we send it to? We send it to our delegation members. Do we send it to the governor? Do we send it to all members of the House of Delegates, all members of the Senate? What do we do when we...
The base information when we support something is that when there's a hearing on it, we have a statement that goes on the record. If it's something that we feel very strongly about, we have somebody that testified there at the time. We share the information.
But all of that would be focused on the committee hearing.
So
That's right.
If there's a hearing on the bill, then just automatically we submit a copy of a letter.
If there's something that's one of our top priorities. If sometimes there are things that we approved in the past, but it's a small matter and it's not going anywhere, I might not get a statement out on those. If it is something that, and in any event, our lobbyist has the list of these things so that she brings them up as she's having her conversations too. So there's that informal thing. If there's something that we want to be very strong on, then we send it also separately to our delegation. We don't do that on a normal basis.
Let me ask a question, a strategic policy question. I mean, one concern I would have is that if we sort of jump in on a lot of bills where we're sort of thinking, it would be a nice idea to support it, even though, like the one that Seth was talking about just now, it probably isn't going to have any influence. Just strategically, I just don't know the answer to this. I mean, if we keep sort of appearing as sort of sending in letters on a whole bunch of things, do we risk diluting our effectiveness on stuff that actually does matter to us?
Most bills have a stack of paper from different entities that submit statements, so it can just be it can disappear. That's why it's important. Sometimes it's important because the staff person on a committee or the legislative analyst reads ours and puts it together as part of, here's the entities who are supporting it. It's very helpful to Tacoma Park and similar entities for these reasons. And so that can be useful. If it's something that we feel strongly about and this council identifies as part of the discussions with the lobbyists or through our conversations that it's a top priority, we do independent visits. We have a variety of things to say this isn't just our standard letter. I think that it is important that we think strategically about what we put forward so that it's clear what our primary interest is, so that, if we had an image that doesn't matter what, we jump in on, anything that's kind of on this side of something and it starts to seem frivolous, that would be a problem. I don't think we're at that point. But it is part of this is a tough time of the season right now because it's just everything every day. But at the beginning of the legislative process, somewhere in the early September, when we're thinking about what's coming up, your indications about what's most important to the city give direction to the lobbyists to kind of identify which bills to look out for, which ones we want to weigh in on, who we should be talking with. And so that's how we kind of couch it and give it some substance.
Yeah, because my thinking is, I mean, we've got one really good lobbyist, and I don't want to wear her out.
She's real good. She can handle multiple things. But she wants to know when she's talking with somebody, when she's talking to Rich Madaleno or somebody, and she's talking HUR money. I mean, she'll be making a case that this is critical to Tacoma Park.
And just that we can keep our ammunition dry and not just shoot it all over Annapolis.
The other side of it is that staff has to somehow transmit this information, and there's only, my Sundays working on legislation get tiresome. So partly thinking about, how we direct staff resources for this too is important.
Okay.
And just to follow through on Councilmember Grimes' sense on the minimum wage law, my sense of us having a position on that, people in Annapolis are, that's a big deal this session, and it's a governor's priority, and so there's all kinds of people weighing in on it. There's all kinds of people working it. Tacoma Park weighing in on that issue, the reception is mostly going to be, of course. We expected, it would be interesting if we weighed in against it, then they would take notice. Us weighing in on it, it just goes in the stack.
Probably the same with marijuana.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm assuming that's the case.
And our legislators are all on board on these bills already.
Yeah. Right. But,
marijuana and minimum wage.
But remember that the huge majority of action in Annapolis is in the committees. By the time it gets to the floor, with a few rare exceptions, it's decided.
Yep. Some of these bills, though, and minimum wage, I think of as one, is more a statement about a principle. And so many of the things we have to say on broad legislation are not going to have that much impact. But this is one where it's about the principle of whether people should be paid, I'll use the word a decent wage, right, because it's not necessarily a living wage, and whether we want to weigh in on that issue. Given that it is going to move, do we want to be on record that we are supportive of this moving forward or not? And I would assume that something like the minimum wage bill is not something that our lobbyists would spend a lot of time working for the precise reasons we just identified. So, I add that. That's, to me, why I agree with Councilmember Schultz's comment that we don't want to, there's 4,000 bills introduced in Annapolis, and we don't want to have a position on even 400 of them. But, our list is still less than 40, still less than 1%. So that's why I support on this particular one a position.
Yeah, I think we've heard a lot of different bills here tonight that we're kind of in support of, but I think we need to be sympathetic to staff's time also. I think it's a reality.
It's a real issue.
It's a reality, and so what we might think about doing is prioritizing those where we really want staff support to do it, and then those where we just want a statement saying, yeah, we support this, and not spending a lot of staff time to do that.
Well, bills like the local investment bill, I just would assume, not necessarily even a letter, but just that the people who would go to testify in committee would be Tacoma Park people, and they would be empowered to say the city of Tacoma Park supports this.
I'm just saying I think there's different tiers, and I think the council should maybe spend a little bit of time, not necessarily tonight at 10:30, but a little bit of time thinking what those tiers are and how we can do this a little more organized in the future.
Well, it's clear our priorities we already voted over the summer, when the MML was asking for them.
But there's a lot more paper on the table than there was then.
Yeah, so that we might be able to provide direction, like we support a simple letter to go in is all that's needed, or we want somebody to testify, or we support and will empower other people who are going to testify to mention the city. Those various levels can be helpful in terms of the workload.
Thanks.
Anything else? Did you have something?
No.
Anybody else? Okay. City Manager's Quarterly Activities Report, Financial Report.
Thank
Thank you. I will try to be brief with this. So this is our the quarterly report for the second quarter of fiscal year 14, which covers October through December of 2013. Marks the midway point in our fiscal year. I apologize in advance. I think there was a bit of a translation problem on some of our links as it related to from when I sent it to when it got printed. So there's a few typos and errors in here, which we will correct in the version that ends up going up on our website. I will always like to start with the so what. So one of the purposes, I think, of the quarterly report is how are we doing as it relates to revenues and expenditures for the city? And we have revenues that total roughly 58% of what we anticipated we would receive as of this time, and we have expenditures that were about 43% of what we budgeted we would receive as of this time. In discussions with our finance office, we think that that's within anticipated amounts. Again, we have sort of lumpy revenues and lumpy expenditures, so we're always going to be off of our 50% or our 25 or 75%, even our 100%, to be honest with you. So this is within anticipated figures. If that's the first part of the quarterly report, then the second part of the quarterly report really is to talk a little bit about some of the actions that the city is taking, some of the measures in terms of data that we have, as well as just some of the general trends that are happening within each of our departments, but more importantly, what those departments translate into, which is services for our residents and other amenities. For this quarterly report, and just sort of a note that we continue to change the quarterly report. I know some of it may not be necessarily obvious every time you read it, but one of the takeaways from the most recent council retreat is to continue to try to innovate as it relates to the data measures that we have. And so one of the ideas from this one was we're sort of moving away from this idea that departments have divisions that report information, because that's not how our residents think about things. And so this is getting more towards, and obviously it's not perfect, we will continue to refine it, but getting more towards what are some of the outcomes that are more important, as opposed to thinking about divisions within departments. We have some information this time as an example that talks a little bit about some of our website information. Just some interesting little factoids. We've got sort of a listing of the top 10 web page views from the city website. The top 10 sort of represent 36% of all the total page views, but that's a little deceptive in that those 36% really constitutes the majority of where people are going to. The rest of the 64% of our page views are really just one-time incidents. And so this tells the story about what people are actually going to our website to take a look at. And you'll see that sort of the top four, after you get past just the initial web page, is the recreation page, the careers page, the police page, and the public works page. So that's what people are actually going to see when they are checking out the city of Tacoma Park. Just another, and this is more of a qualitative remark, and it was repeated again by the library later on, which is that there's about 30% of all of our site traffic is being assessed by mobile devices this time. So the library noted in the report that they're seeing a much higher usage of our Wi-Fi system by wireless devices. They think it's largely because the pricing of wireless devices continues to drop, and so people are more and more accessing both of our network as well as our actual site by phones and tablets, which just also obviously hastens our need to try to make sure that our site is easily able to be viewed from mobile devices, which is something we're going to be working on. On the economic development front, there seem to be a few items that I wanted to point out briefly. One is that we had some additional businesses that opened at the tail end of last year. We had, I think, 3 in the Tacoma-Langley area, and we had 2, including Republic, that opened in the Main Street, Tacoma area. So again, just I think points to the fact that businesses continue to be interested in opening in Tacoma Park and see opportunity here, which I think is generally a good sign. The city completed a grant which had sort of been outstanding for a little while with Washington Adventist University, so we were very happy to see that, to do a facade renovation program. And the Walgreens property finally did sell, and I think we noted that maybe at a previous council meeting. It was up for sale by Walgreens in a portfolio of some of the larger properties that it had across the country. It sold to a company called Nightingale Properties. We generally think that that's a good thing because Walgreens had been a little unreceptive, I think, generally to some of our discussion points with them. There's no indication that any of the existing businesses will leave as a result of the sale, but I think it does provide us another opportunity to contact the new property owner, new owner, and to offer city services and assistance to them. I know that the mayor had a phone call message with the president of Nightingale just to introduce Tacoma Park to them. So I think it's a good sign that that we're being open to new businesses, and especially in this important commercial area for Tacoma Park.
Oh, I would note that one of the largest vacancies on the Nightingale property just put up a big new sign, discount store, but it's somebody moving in. To one of the most obvious vacancies that faces both directions.
Both directions. That's good news. Just some additional items. We have some new bike sharrows that went in along Maple Avenue. We extended Wi-Fi service to the PW building, which again hopefully necessitates if folks go up there and want to have access to our free public wireless network, they'll be able to do that. We put some new presentation and sound equipment in the Azalea room. Again, that room is used for a variety of public entities, and so just providing some additional resources for them. And finally, we had one of our children and teen librarians, Karen McPherson, was chosen to serve on the Caldecott Awards Committee, which is a prestigious honor. So we are very happy and excited for that. That's all that I'll say for the report for now.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for this report. First, would like to just express my appreciation for the continual leaps in quality of the report, not just in the fact that it includes graphics, but just the content. It's meaningful content, and I really, really appreciate that. I had one question that's kind of related to the report. First of all, on page 21, I was looking at the charts on the emergency financial assistance, and there are a couple of surprises there, but certainly Ward 5 is a mountain of need, and I think that as a council we should be working with our colleague Mr. Smith to think about how we can better address those needs of our residents of the city. I was really surprised to see Ward 3 going from 0 in 2011 to about the second highest now in receipts of financial assistance. And I'm kind of curious what's going on there in Ward 3. I'm not sure if we have an answer to that. But one question I had is, I had a resident in Ward 4 who was really in financial distress last month, was facing potential eviction, was unable to buy food or toothpaste. I guess you don't need the toothpaste if you don't have the food, but just really desperate financially. I suggested they go to Ministries of United's Silver Spring Tacoma, MUST, to seek financial assistance. And I was surprised when he said they didn't even take a application from him. They just referred him directly to Health and Human Services with the county. And I was curious whether we've run out of funds for that program, or they have run out of funds for that program, or if there's qualifications that I'm unfamiliar with. And I don't expect you to answer that tonight, but if you give me some feel for what's going on there, I'd appreciate it. And the rest of the story is, of course, we were able to find him some food assistance, and he was able to get his financial problems straightened out, at least to where he's saved his apartment and able to look forward to a more stable income. Thank you.
And it looks like you, along with a number of others of us up here, spotted the typo at the top of page 21.
Yeah, there's a couple in here, but Mr. Kenner had already acknowledged that, so I didn't need to focus on that.
I wasn't focusing, I was just noticing that a number of us marked the same thing. Councilmember Mayo.
Thank you. I have some comments I'll share by email with the council, they're really just questions. They don't necessarily need to be handled on mic 1040. But I want to repeat what Councilmember Seaman said, which is thank you for this report. It's really helpful, really informative. I learned a huge deal from this report and the previous one that helps me do a better job. And I know there are constituents who benefit from it too. The one comment I had, or one area of concern, was in the budget table expenditures, noting that the communications branch of the public safety or police department is one of the lowest expenditure rates, 39%. And I know communications is one of our most important, one of the most important things we do, and has been a subject of a number of recent discussions about crime and the police force. I just wanted to just mention that. You don't have to address it right now, but I just wanted to point out that that was a concern.
I think that is the dispatch service, not the kind of, is that what you were talking about?
Yeah.
Dispatch? Okay.
It's just dispatch? That line is just dispatch? Okay.
I guess 11.
Thank you.
Anybody got anything else? Thanks. As others have said, very helpful report. We keep seeing vast improvements. And I think...
If I can follow up, though, especially if there's something that you like, if you give us feedback so we don't change it the next time, that'd be great. I'm sure the city manager would appreciate it.
I found the format of the graphics helpful.
Yes, the graphs are great.
Council members look at pictures, not words.
I'll just say, to be very open, is that I have not had a chance to read the report, so just looking at the pictures, they're pretty. No, and I will look at it, and I will read the whole thing, and I'll be pleased to make comments as to what I would, like and what might be changed, but mostly I'm just going to be caring about the substance.
With that, I believe we're adjourned.